Chapter 8:26. Leaving the first heaven, the demon king flew into a rage out of humiliation. The human in front of him was really asking for it. As he spoke, the demon king stomped his foot and swung the black spear in his hand. Monstrous demonic chi surged out and swept toward Zhuan, wanting to drown him completely. Zhuan was not afraid. The blood spear in his hand shot out and turned into a sea of blood. It formed a blood-red vortex in the air and smashed into the demonic chi. Boom! Suddenly, there was a violent explosion. The sky above Shenzhen was divided by the sea of blood and the demonic chi. They seemed to be facing each other, occupying half of the sky. What a terrifying attack! The Great Guardian is so powerful? He actually blocked the Demon King's attack. Looking at the terrifying demonic chi and sea of blood in the sky, the people of Shenzhen were shocked. They originally thought that Zhuan was not very strong at such a young age, so they did not have much hope for Zhuan. But now, after seeing the strength that Zhuan used to fight the Demon King head-on, everyone's opinion of him changed. It is indeed the Azura blood spear. Guardian Zhuan did not disappoint me. He actually managed to comprehend it. The Sacred Lord's eyes shone brightly in the black cage. He was pleasantly surprised. The Azura blood spear was one of the most terrifying forces of heaven and earth. It was many times stronger than his light force. In addition, the forces of heaven and earth had an extremely strong suppressive effect on the Moro tribe. Although Zhuan's cultivation was not as strong as the Sacred Lord's, with the Azura blood spear, Zhuan was not afraid of the Demon King at all. Demonic Shadow World. The Demon King roared and demonic chi surged out. It was like a dark cloud that covered the sky behind him. Then, terrifying black shadows flashed out from the dark cloud and rushed towards Zhuan. Azura transformation. Zhuan said coldly. The sea of blood shrouded him and turned into a blood shadow that was almost 1,000 feet tall. Boom, boom, boom. The blood shadow took a step forward and pressed down with its huge arm. The powerful force was able to tear the surrounding space apart. For a moment, the Demon King's demonic shadow world was blocked. You have some skills, but let's see if you can block my attack. Seeing the demonic shadow world being blocked, the Demon King was not too much. He took a step forward and his right hand, the Demon King's shadow world. Then, his right hand that was the size of a small hill. Mountain and mountain, smashing toward Zhuan. 3 pairs of lightning wings unfurled, and Zhuo Wenhua turned into a lightning shadow, instantly dodging the Demon King's attack. Demon King World Shenzhen. Xing Shenzhen. Of Shenzhen. Zhuan of Shenzhen. Of Shenglu Shas Shou, Shenzhen Sh Shenzhen. Shengs of Zhua. Of Shenzhen's. Lin, cunning human, do you only know how to hide? The Demon King shouted angrily. Of course not. A lightning shadow flashed past. 100 meters away, Zhuan stared at the Demon King. He smiled and said, "Since you want to fight so much, I'll fight with you." Great Sun Nirvana Law. As he spoke, Zhuowen's entire body burst out in a golden radiance, transforming into 4 heads and 8 arms. His entire body was as dazzling as the blazing sun. At the same time, each of his 8 arms held 8 long spears that glinted with a cold light. I'd like to see if you can block the Azura blood spear with 8 times the power. With a shout, Zhuan took a step forward. Instead of retreating, he rushed towards the Demon King. The Azura blood spear's power erupted. An endless sea of blood gushed out and surrounded Zhuan, forming 8 terrifying blood sea vortexes. What? How did this human spear power suddenly become so strong? Sensing the sudden change in Zhuowen's form and the sudden increase in power of the spear, the Demon King was stunned. Maybe it's just a bluff. Watch me kill this kid. Demon beheading. The Devil King narrowed his eyes and roared angrily. Endless demonic chi surged out and turned into a huge black blade that was several hundred feet long in his hand. On the black blade, a group of demons danced, wailed, and howled. It looked eerie and terrifying. Break for me! Zhuan roared angrily. His 8 arms slammed down. The 8 Azura blood spear's power completely erupted. The blood-red vortex almost soared into the sky like a bridge connecting heaven and earth. It looked extremely spectacular. How terrifying! Looking at the huge blood-red vortex that spanned across heaven and earth, whether it was the warriors of Shenzhen or the surviving demons, they were all shocked. Their hearts trembled involuntarily because of this terrifying power. They couldn't imagine that a human could exert such terrifying power. Kacha! The black blade collided with the blood-red vortex, and its forward momentum came to an abrupt halt. Then, countless cracks appeared on its surface, and these cracks continued to spread. In the end, it was all shattered into countless black powder. The Demon King was stunned. Countless demons were stunned. Even the warriors of Shenzhen were stunned. The Demon King's all-out attack was easily broken when it collided with Yun. Die for me. Once the black blade was broken, Jun did not hesitate. The 8 spears slammed down on the Demon King's head. A mournful scream sounded. The Demon King's huge body was gradually being devoured by the blood-red vortex. It exploded into clouds of blood mist. The scream did not last long. Then, the Demon King's huge body completely turned into a rain of blood in the blood-red vortex. The Demon King of a generation was killed by a human. Everyone's eyes became numb. Under the rain of blood, the figure that was silently suspended in midair was forever imprinted in the depths of everyone's hearts. Perhaps many years later, this figure would not be forgotten. This was because what this figure did today shook the entire first layer of heaven and earth. He killed the Demon King of a generation, saved the entire Shenzhen, and even the living beings of this world. At the same time, the black cages on the warriors of Shenzhen disappeared. These cages were formed by the Demon King's demonic aura. Since the Demon King was dead, it naturally could not exist. Brother, it's Yun. He did it. He killed the Demon King and saved us. Yao Shuling suddenly jumped up. Her beautiful eyes stared at Zhuan's back. Her heart was beating like a fawn, and a rare blush appeared on her beautiful cheeks. Zhuan was young, but his strength was also very strong. Now, he had suddenly risen to the top, killed the Demon King, and saved the human race. Yao Shuling was at the age where she was yearning for love. How could she not be moved by such a young talent? Great Guardian! Great Guardian! After the shock, countless warriors of Shenzhen roared toward the sky. They were crazy and excited. They originally thought that they would die and be enslaved by the demonic creatures again. But now, Yun appeared and killed the Demon King. How could they not cheer? At this moment, everyone stared at the figure in awe. There was no longer any contempt in their hearts. There was only reverence and fanaticism. With the death of the Demon King, the remaining demonic creatures were basically no longer a threat. They were wiped out one by the warriors of Shenzhen. So, a light flashed and the Sacred Lord arrived in front of Jun. He looked at the young man in front of him, his eyes filled with many indescribable emotions. There was excitement, complexity, and happiness. Guardian Zhua, you have made a great contribution this time. On behalf of the human race, I would like to express my deep respect for you. The Sacred Lord bowed and said with great sincerity. Jun helped the Sacred Lord up and smiled. I should be the one saying these words. If it weren't for the Sacred Lord bringing me to the land of the Blood Spear and helping me explain the general trend of the world, I, Jun, would not have been able to comprehend the Azura Blood Spear's potential so quickly. The Sacred Lord firmly shook his head. That was only a support. It was all because of you, Guardian Zhua. If your perception was not strong, you would not have been able to comprehend the spear's potential in such a short time. It was you who saved the human race and gave us a future. You are worthy of this thank you. Seeing that the Sacred Lord was so determined, Jun did not refuse, because he would soon be leaving the first layer of the world. After he killed the Demon King, Taoist Master Zonglong's words rang in his mind, successfully comprehend the general trend of the world and kill the Demon King. Within 10 breaths, you will be teleported out of the first layer of the world. In other words, Jun only had 10 breaths of time left. After 10 breaths, he would be teleported out of this world by Taoist Master Zonglong So. 2 more figures came to Zhuowen's side. They were Yao Shuling and Yao Yen. Yao Shuling had a shy expression on her face. She was like a little girl, secretly sizing up Zhuan. The corners of her mouth could not help but reveal a secret smile. Yao Yen looked at the young man in front of him with a complicated expression. He never thought that the unruly young man would become so terrifying 3 years later. Even the Demon King was killed by him and saved the entire human race. Protector Zhua, I never thought that you would be so powerful. Did I misjudge you before? Yao Shuling seemed to have gathered her courage. Her beautiful eyes looked straight at Zhuan as she spoke softly. Zhuan could also see the strange expression on Yao Shuling's face. His eyes flickered as he said, "All of this is thanks to the Sacred Lord. Otherwise, my strength would not have increased so quickly. Alright, it's time for me to go." Go? Where are you going? Hearing this, Yao Shuling suddenly asked in a somewhat panicked manner. Her pretty face was a little pale. To where I should go. Yun was not from this world after all. Now that 10 breaths of time was up, Taoist Master Zonglong's power had begun to summon him. Boom! A strong beam of light pierced through the sky and suddenly descended from the sky. It immediately enveloped Zhuan. A strong suction force came from within, causing Zhuan to slowly fly up into the sky. Looking at the beam of light that had suddenly descended, as well as the young man who was continuously rising in the beam of light, everyone was stunned. Protector Zhua. The Sacred Lord roared angrily. He stomped his foot and tried to pull Zhuan back. Unfortunately, the moment his right hand reached into the beam of light, a terrifying force exploded. The Sacred Lord immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying. Looking at the Sacred Lord who was sent flying and spitting out blood, everyone's eyes narrowed. What a terrifying beam of light. Even the Sacred Lord was injured when he touched it. Chapter 8:27. Divine Sun Cauldron. When the pillar of light disappeared, even Zhuowen's figure completely disappeared from everyone's sight. For a moment, the entire Shenzhen became incomparably silent. What's going on? That pillar of light descended from the sky, and then the Great Protector disappeared just like that? Everyone looked at each other in dismay. The scene just now was truly inconceivable. However, they had no more reasonable explanation and could only remain silent. The sacred leader slowly stood up with the help of a few Shenzhen elders. He raised his head and looked at Zhuowen's figure that had already disappeared. His eyes were filled with shock. That pillar of light was too terrifying. He had only come into contact with it for a moment, but he had been injured and reduced to such a sorry state. Where did Protector Zhuo come from? Could it be that he's not from this world at all? The sacred leader's gaze was complicated. He suddenly remembered that Zhuowen's origins had been a mystery from the moment he appeared. After all, Zhuowen was so young, but his own strength was so terrifying. If he was a human from this world, then as the sacred leader of Shenzhen, it was impossible for him not to know. However, Zhuowen seemed to have appeared out of nowhere and appeared in Shenzhen. Then, he was taken away by a pillar of light that descended from the sky. These various phenomena made the sacred leader suspect that Zhuowen might not be from this world at all. Perhaps Protector Zhua is a powerhouse from the same world as the Taoist who rode the pale white dragon 10,000 years ago. He muttered softly. Zhuowen's appearance was too sudden, and the strength he displayed was also extremely shocking. The sacred leader could not help but associate Zhuowen with the Taoist Song Long from 10,000 years ago. Both of them were equally mysterious, and at the same time, they had saved the human race. The light gradually faded, and Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. He realized that he was no longer in Shenzhen, but in an extremely grand hall. This hall was extremely large, and above it was a domed dome. The surface of the dome was dotted with countless stars, and it looked mysterious and distant. At the foot of the hall, there were countless clouds and mists spreading out. Congratulations, Tester. You've passed the first layer of the Azure Dragon Hall. A grand voice resounded throughout the entire Great Hall. Zhuowen recognized it the moment he heard it. Wasn't this the voice of Taoist Song Long? I've passed the first layer of the world. This Taoist Song Long should at least show some interest. Zhuowen muttered in his heart. This layer of heaven and earth was both difficult and simple. After all, as long as one could comprehend the power of heaven and earth within 3 years, it would be enough to deal with the invasion of the demonic beasts. This was because the power of heaven and earth was very effective against the demonic beasts. If Zhuowen hadn't comprehended the power of the Azura blood spear, it would have been difficult for him to deal with the Devil King. Therefore, as long as he comprehended the power of the Azura blood spear, he would be able to pass. The Azure Dragon Palace is the work of my blood, sweat, and tears. It contains the numinous treasures, origin formations, and various armor skills and secret techniques that I have collected and refined over the years. The entire Azure Dragon Hall is my proud work. It has already reached the level of a saint-rank spirit treasure. At this point, the Taoist Song Long's voice was filled with pride. It was obvious that the Azure Dragon Hall was his proud work. Saint-rank spirit treasure? It's actually so high level. Hearing this, Duan was shocked. The highest level he had come into contact with was the heaven rank spirit treasure, and after the heaven rank were the emperor rank and the emperor rank. After the emperor rank was the saint rank. This was a terrifying spirit treasure that only saints could use. Ordinary warriors referred to emperor rank spirit treasures as emperor weapons, emperor rank spirit treasures as emperor weapons, and saint rank spirit treasures as saint weapons. The peach blossom origin diagram used by Emperor Qing was an emperor weapon. Zhuowen did not expect that the Azure Dragon Hall was actually a spirit treasure that was even more terrifying than the peach blossom origin diagram. It was actually a saint-rank spirit treasure, but when he thought about how the master of the Azure Dragon Hall, Taoist Song Long, was a powerful saint, Zhuowen felt relieved. Through this layer of heaven and earth, you have the qualifications to obtain an emperor-rank spirit treasure and a special secret technique. Taoist Song Long's voice sounded again. Then, countless starlight descended from the dome, forming a screen of light. On the screen of light, there were rows of dazzling words. Only when he focused his eyes did Zhuowen discover that the contents of these glowing words were actually the names of various kinds of soul treasures. There were even classifications within them, ranging from heaven-rank soul treasures to saint-rank soul treasures. Furthermore, the higher the classification, the fewer soul treasures there were. Among them, there was only one saint-rank spirit treasure, and that was the Azure Dragon Hall. There were 5 emperor-rank spirit treasures. These 5 were the Gourd of Heaven and Earth, the 8 Spears of Heaven, the Taiji Mysterious Gate, the Taishur Origin Sword, and the Thorny Divine Armor. Inside the emperor-rank spirit treasure, Zhuowen's gaze was fixed on the 8 Spears of Heaven. There were a total of 8 Spears of Heaven, and they possessed the power of the heavens. If he used the 8 Spears of Heaven, it was enough to crush and destroy the heavens. Its power was extremely terrifying. Yuan himself was a spear user, and when he used the nirvana of the Great Sun, he could transform into 4 heads and 8 arms. The 8 Spears of Heaven was too suitable for him. Unfortunately, the 8 Spears of Heaven were emperor-rank spirit treasures, and Zhuowen could only choose one emperor-rank spirit treasure after passing through the first layer of heaven and earth. Taoist Song Long, if I pass through the second layer of heaven and earth, can I choose an emperor-rank spirit treasure? Zhuowen suddenly raised his head and asked. After a long while, Taoist Song Long's voice came from the hall. If you pass through the second layer of heaven and earth, you can choose an emperor-rank spirit treasure. If you pass through the third layer of heaven and earth, you can control the entire Azure Dragon Hall and become the master of the Azure Dragon Hall. However, the 3 layers of heaven and earth, each layer is more difficult than the last. The difficulty of the second layer of heaven and earth is 100 times that of the first layer of heaven and earth, while the difficulty of the third layer of heaven and earth is 10,000 times that of the first layer of heaven and earth. Want to pass through the second layer of heaven and earth? Only by having the strength of peak Empyrean realm will there be a trace of success, so act according to your ability. Hearing that, Zhuowen's pupils constricted slightly. The difficulty of the second layer of heaven and earth was actually 100 times that of the first layer of heaven and earth, and it at least required the strength of peak Empyrean realm to have a trace of success. The second layer of heaven and earth was actually so difficult, then the third layer of heaven and earth was even more out of reach for Zhuowen. Then my current strength is insufficient, wouldn't entering the second layer of heaven and earth be courting death? Zhuowen asked again. Although in the first layer of heaven and earth this time, Zhuowen's harvest was quite bountiful, and his cultivation also advanced from the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm to the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. His strength was only around the Golden Venerable realm, still too far away from the Empyrean realm. Listening to Taoist Song Long's suggestion, wanting to pass through the second layer of heaven and earth, one's strength had to be at least peak Empyrean realm to have a trace of a chance. Thinking up to here, Yun felt somewhat of a headache. A ray of light landed in Zhuowen's palm, and a white jade token appeared. On the surface of the jade token, the word was written. This is the Tsang Long token. With the Tsang Long token, you have 3 chances to enter and exit the Tsang Long Hall. If you don't pass through the third layer of heaven and earth in these 3 chances, then you have no fate with the Tsang Long Hall. Taoist Tsang Long said indifferently. Holding the Tsang Long token in his palm, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, and he was quite surprised in his heart. It seemed that this Taoist Tsang Long was not someone who did not leave any leeway. He actually had this kind of token to enter and exit the Tsang Long Hall. This also meant that he, Zhuowen, could directly teleport out with this Tsang Long token. As for the second layer of heaven and earth, he could wait until his strength was stronger before entering. This Taoist Tsang Long's rule is quite humane. Zhuowen nodded and muttered to himself in satisfaction. Tester, choose your spirit treasure and secret method. As for staying or leaving, it's all up to you. Taoist Tsang Long's voice once again sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Nodding his head, Zhuowen's gaze went past the Emperor Stage Spirit Treasure category and landed on the Emperor Stage Spirit Treasure category. He knew that it was impossible for him to exchange for the 8 spears of sky burial now. There were quite a number of Emperor Stage Spirit Treasure categories. There were actually close to 100 of them. It was a dazzling lineup that dazzled Zhuowen's eyes. You have too few life-saving spirit treasures. This Dragon Lord advises you to choose a defensive spirit treasure. Although your physical body is indeed very strong, if you encounter a peak Empyrean or an Emperor Stage expert, you will be killed in an instant. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly sounded. At this moment, her voice was filled with seriousness. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Ever since Emperor Qing almost stripped his dragon soul, Zhuowen was full of fear and vigilance towards Emperor Qing. At the same time, he also realized that his defense was indeed too weak. Perhaps it was because the Nirvana Vairocana was too powerful before, so Zhuowen did not pay much attention to his own defense. After the sneak attack by Su Lingtian last time, Zhuowen completely realized that he was indeed too careless about his own defense. You're right. This time, I must find a defensive spirit treasure. Nodding his head, Zhuowen looked at the list and began to search for defensive spirit treasures. Soon, he locked onto 3 defensive spirit treasures that were extremely suitable for him. These 3 spirit treasures were all top-grade monarch rank spirit treasures, and one of them was called the Evil King Armor. Supposedly, this armor was made from the blood essence of a great devil that had committed heinous crimes during the ancient times, and it was filled with extremely terrifying resentment. Wearing this Evil King armor, once someone attacked you, they would be attacked by the endless resentment contained in the Evil King armor. If you were caught off guard, it would be enough to cause the attacker to be corroded by the resentment and fall into a daze for a short period of time. Moreover, its defensive power was extremely terrifying. The second was the 8 Dragons picture. It was a huge calligraphy painting. It was refined with the soul and blood essence of 8 dragons. It could summon 8 dragons to protect oneself. Its defense was extremely strong. The third was the Divine Sun Furnace. It was a furnace with sun runes engraved on its surface. It was said that it could absorb the power of the sun and form a powerful defense. Moreover, it was said that the Divine Sun Furnace also had the effect of tempering the body. It could greatly increase the strength of the owner's body. Looking at these 3 spirit treasures, Zhuowen hesitated. It could be said that these 3 defensive spirit treasures were very strong. Whether it was the resentment special effect of the Evil King armor, the powerful defense of the 8 dragons picture, or the tempering effect of the Divine Sun Furnace, he was more interested in them. Chapter 8:28. Go out, I choose the Divine Sun Cauldron. Zhuowen shouted at the Azure Dragon Hall. As soon as the shout fell, a blazing sun slowly rose from the top of the hall. The blazing light almost caused Zhuan to narrow his eyes. Within the blazing sun, there was a 3-meter-wide furnace floating. The surface of the furnace was engraved with sun runes. When the blazing sun reached its peak, it fell like the setting sun. In the end, it quietly landed in front of Zhuan, revealing the appearance of a furnace. It was the divine sun cauldron. Stretching out his right hand, Zhuan stroked the surface of the divine sun cauldron and immediately felt a blazing heat. It was as if what appeared in front of him was not a furnace but a real sun. Boom! The sun runes on the surface of the divine sun cauldron suddenly lit up. Dazzling sun flames surged out and surrounded Zhuan in the middle. The blazing temperature almost caused the surrounding space to collapse and become unstable. Being in the middle of the sun's fire, Zhuan did not feel the slightest bit of discomfort. Instead, his entire body felt warm. Furthermore, he discovered that the sun's fire had actually entered his body and was constantly tempering his body. The divine sun cauldron indeed has the effect of tempering the body. It's really magical. Feeling his body being constantly tempered, Zhuan's eyes revealed a look of pleasant surprise. With a wave of his right hand, countless sun flames were immediately sucked into the divine sun cauldron. Then, Zhuan kept it in his spirit ring. I've already chosen the spirit treasure, so now it's time to choose the secret technique. After putting away the divine sun cauldron, Zhuan's gaze fell on the light screen. It belonged to the category of secret techniques. The number of secret techniques that Taoist Song Long had collected over the years was extremely large, actually reaching several thousand types. At a glance, it was actually densely packed with the names of secret techniques. Among them, there were attack type, defense type, special type, and so on, which really broadened Zhuan's horizons. Looking at the dense array of secret techniques on the light screen, Zhuan revealed a hesitant expression. To be honest, his attack power was already extremely strong, and with the divine sun cauldron, his defense wasn't bad either. There was no need for these two types of secret techniques. Then I'll choose the special type secret technique. Zhuan murmured softly as he looked at the list of special secret techniques. After a period of filtering, he quickly fixed his eyes on one of the secret techniques. 100 Transformation Technique? This secret technique was called the 100 Transformations Technique. This secret technique had nothing to do with fighting, but it had an extremely powerful effect, and that was the ability to transform. Moreover, there were thousands of transformations. Martial artists who cultivated the 100 Transformation Divine Technique could change their appearance, aura, and cultivation at will. Moreover, this secret technique was so superb that even experts with higher cultivation would find it difficult to see through their essence. This is good. It can even conceal one's aura and cultivation level. Looking at the 100 Transformation Divine Technique in front of him, Zhuan's eyes flashed. After choosing the secret technique, he was prepared to leave the Azure Dragon Palace, and he had many enemies in the imperial capital. Not to mention the mysterious and powerful Emperor Qing, just the Feng, Chao, and Glan families wanted nothing more than to kill Zhuan. In addition, the Azure Dragon Branch Palace was also eyeing Zhuan covetously. If he, Zhuan, were to openly appear in the imperial capital like this, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, if he, Zhuan, cultivated the secret technique of the 100 Transformation Divine Technique and changed his appearance, aura, and cultivation, then even if he appeared in the imperial capital, no one would be able to recognize him. At that time, Zhuan would be much safer. I'll choose this 100 Transformation Divine Technique. After choosing the secret technique, the Azure Dragon Taoist handed the secret technique Jade Slip to Zhuan on time. Could cultivate the 100 Transformation Divine Technique before leaving the Azure Dragon Palace, Xiao He suddenly said. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. Then, his consciousness entered the Jade Slip, and he silently studied the 100 Transformation Divine Technique. 3 days later, Zhuan slowly opened his eyes, and a meaningful smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. Then, a ray of black light flashed across Zhuan's face, and his face instantly changed. He no longer had the appearance of a youth, but that of a middle-aged man. This middle-aged man's face was sallow, and his eyes were lifeless. He looked like a sickly person, as if he would be blown away by the wind. Moreover, Zhuowen's aura had become completely different, and his cultivation had been concealed to around the ultimate emperor realm. This 100 transformation divine technique is really amazing. It can actually change my appearance, aura, and cultivation at the same time. Moreover, my appearance can continuously change according to my will. The corners of Zhuowen's mouth were full of smiles. This 100 transformation divine technique was like a timely rain to him, and it was extremely important. It's time to go out. I wonder where this Azure Dragon token will teleport me to? It won't teleport me to the true dragon's corpse at the bottom of the magma pool, right? At this point, Zhuowen's expression turned somewhat ugly. He knew that the soaring serpent was still near the true dragon's corpse, waiting there. If he went out, wouldn't he be sending himself to his death? Although his strength had greatly improved, he still wasn't very confident that he could face the soaring serpent. That was a terrifying giant beast from ancient times. Just its terrifying physical body alone was already comparable to an existence like Emperor Qing. The Azure Dragon token contains the miniature universe formation. It can teleport you to any place within a range of 10,000 miles. As long as you want it, it can teleport you to any place you want. The Azure Dragon Taoist's voice rang out again. Hearing this, Yuan was relieved. According to the Azure Dragon Taoist's words, he should be able to directly rely on the Azure Dragon token to teleport to the imperial capital outside the dragon veins. As he spoke, Yuan no longer hesitated. He channeled his origin energy into the Azure Dragon token and immediately activated the miniature universe formation within the token. A pillar of light enveloped Zhuowen, and then Zhuowen disappeared from the hall. In a desolate area outside the imperial capital, a pillar of light suddenly appeared, and then a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion appeared in this desolate area. This person was Zhuowen after changing his appearance. Looking around, Zhuowen's gaze stared at the huge imperial capital in front of him and said to himself, "I'm finally out. Xiaohe, how long have we been in the dragon veins?" "About a month." Xiaohe said unhurriedly. "It's already been a month. I wonder how Big Brother Han Tian and the geniuses of Muqin County are doing? I need to enter the imperial capital to find out more." As he spoke, Yuan took a step forward, and his entire body was like the wind as he quickly rushed towards the imperial capital in front of him. Not long after, Yuan entered the imperial capital. Looking at the huge streets of the imperial capital and the countless martial artists that came and went, Zhuowen's gaze revealed a trace of emotion. Although he had only stayed in the dragon veins for a month, the flow of time in this layer of heaven and earth was so abnormal. In reality, he had already stayed for a full 3 years, and it felt as if a very, very long time had passed. "Let's go to the Drunken Spring Pavilion first." As he spoke, Yuan followed the route in his mind and rushed towards the Drunken Spring Pavilion. After all, within the imperial capital, he was most familiar with the Drunken Spring Pavilion. Moreover, the Drunken Spring Pavilion's ladies should be extremely well informed, so finding the Drunken Spring Pavilion should be the best choice. The Drunken Spring Pavilion was still bustling with people. Many high-ranking officials and powerful martial artists all entered the Drunken Spring Pavilion to listen to music and drink wine, and to pretend to be cultured. "Yo, sir, please come in, please come in. I wonder if sir has come to the Drunken Spring Pavilion to enjoy the dance, drink wine, or stay." Arriving at the entrance of the Drunken Spring Pavilion, a woman who still retained her charm enthusiastically said to Zhuowen. Looking at this beautiful woman, Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly. This woman was not Lady Su, but a woman he did not know. Logically speaking, it was usually Lady Su who hosted this kind of reception ceremony at the entrance. Why was it different today? "I'm here to look for Lady Su," Zhuowen said indifferently. As soon as these words came out, the smile on the beautiful woman's face suddenly stiffened. Her beautiful eyes flickered, but she still smiled and said, "Sir, I'm afraid you've remembered wrongly. Our Drunken Spring Pavilion doesn't have a person called Lady Su." "No Lady Su? A few months ago, I was still received by Lady Su. How come there's no such person now?" Zhuowen suddenly snorted coldly. The beautiful woman's face froze, and her smile faded a lot. She said somewhat coldly, Sir, it seems like you're here to cause trouble. I've already said that our drunken spring pavilion doesn't have a person called Lady Sue. If you're here to cause trouble, please leave. Our drunken spring pavilion is not something you can afford to offend. You're saying that I can't afford to offend your drunken spring pavilion? Today, I'd like to see just how I can't afford to offend you. Zhuowen sneered. He had to find Lady Sue. Moreover, from the beautiful woman's words, Zhuowen could feel the latter's cold attitude towards Lady Sue, as well as the changes in her expression. He was sure that the beautiful woman definitely knew about Lady Sue, and might even know her whereabouts. However, what puzzled Zhuowen was that he had only been missing for a little over a month, and the drunken spring pavilion had changed so much. Even Lady Sue had disappeared without a trace. He did not know what had happened in this 1 month. It seems like you're here to cause trouble. Don't blame me for being impolite. The beautiful woman's beautiful eyes were filled with killing intent, and a terrifying aura surged out. She was actually an ultimate seven-wheel emperor. The confrontation between Zhuowen and the beautiful woman instantly attracted the attention of many people in the drunken spring pavilion. A group of armored guards surged out of the pavilion and surrounded Zhuowen. Sir, I'll give you one more chance. Leave the drunken spring pavilion immediately, or you'll suffer later, the beautiful woman said as she stared coldly at Zhuowen. Zhuowen shook his head and said, I only want to know Lady Sue's whereabouts. Since you won't tell me, I'll force you to tell me. As he spoke, Zhuowen stomped his foot, and his entire body transformed into an illusory shadow. In the blink of an eye, all the surrounding guards let out shrill cries as they were smashed to the ground by Zhuowen. The beautiful woman didn't even have time to react before a hand grabbed her neck and lifted her off the ground like a little chick. Who are you? The beautiful woman was both shocked and furious as she stared at the middle-aged man before her. Speak. I only want to know Lady Sue's whereabouts, Zhuowen said coldly. I know where Lady Sue is. Put her down first. Chapter 829. Imperial City Dungeon. A beautiful figure slowly walked out from the intoxicated spring pavilion. Her figure was graceful, and her dance was graceful. With a veil covering her body, it caused one's imagination to run wild. His gaze slowly moved up, and an appearance that was tender and beautiful like a flower appeared before Zhuowen's eyes, and it was extremely breathtaking. The person who appeared in front of him was Moyan Wushang, the head of the drunken spring pavilion who had invited many young talents to challenge the morning bell and evening drum. So it's Miss Wushang. Zhuowen's expression softened. He gently put down the beautiful woman and stared at the peerless beauty who had appeared in front of him. Does this young master know me? Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes flashed as she looked at Zhuowen, who had turned into a waxen middle-aged man. She revealed a trace of doubt. She didn't seem to know this middle-aged man in front of her. However, the latter's gaze revealed that he was quite familiar with her. Zhuowen also realized that he had lost his composure. He calmed down and said indifferently, Miss Wushang's reputation in the Imperial City is not small. How could I not know of your beauty? Also, since Miss Wushang knows the whereabouts of Mother Sue, can you tell me a thing or two? Moyan Wushang looked at the middle-aged man in front of her with some doubt. She didn't know why, but she felt that this middle-aged man gave her a familiar feeling. It was a very strange feeling. However, after looking carefully for a long time, she still discovered that this person's appearance and temperament gave her a very unfamiliar feeling. She had definitely never seen this person before, but that familiar feeling caused her to frown slightly. After pondering for a moment, Moyan Wushang nodded and said, Then follow me first. After saying that, Moyan Wushang slowly led the way in front. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a thoughtful look as he followed behind Moyan Wushang. However, what surprised Zhuowen was that he still couldn't see through Moyan Wushang's cultivation. From beginning to end, Moyan Wushang seemed to be shrouded in a layer of fog, making people unable to see through her. This woman is not to be underestimated. Her cultivation base is concealed by a layer of power. Even this master dragon is unable to see through her cultivation base. Xiao Hei's voice rang out within Zhuowen's mind. Hearing this, Zhuowen's expression changed. Even Xiao Hei couldn't see through Moyan Wushang. It seemed that Moyan Wushang wasn't simple. Actually, when Zhuan had played the morning bell and evening drum, he had known that moyen of war was not simple. He had just not paid much attention to it at the time. But now, even Xiao He couldn't see through Moyen Wushang's depth. It seemed that this woman wasn't simple. He didn't know what this woman's identity was, but it seemed that she wasn't as simple as she seemed. Moyen Wushang brought Zhuan to the courtyard where she lived. It was still surrounded by rockery, and there was a pavilion. There was a stone table with a guzheng on it. Rockery, pavilion, stone table, and guzheng. At this moment, the four artistic conceptions were intertwined. It was still so tranquil and elegant. May I know why young master is looking for Sun Yang? Moyen Wushang slowly sat in front of the guzheng and asked lazily. Zhuan shook his head and said with a smile, actually, with Miss Wushang here, it doesn't matter if I look for Sun Yang or not. As he spoke, Zhuan's face began to change. From a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion, he slowly turned into a handsome young man. He returned to his original appearance. Looking at the young man in front of him, Moyen Wushang's originally lazy expression gradually faded away. He revealed a trace of surprise and said, "Young Master Zhuo? So it's you." Zhuowen's main purpose in looking for Sun Yang was to understand what had happened in the imperial capital during this month. He also wanted to inquire about the whereabouts of Lu Hantian. Moyen Wushang in front of him was quite mysterious. He was probably even more well-informed than Sun Yang. Moreover, even if Moyen Wushang told Emperor Qing, Yun was not afraid. After all, he had the 100 transformation technique. He could change his appearance and aura at will. Knowing that Yun was not dead was useless. When Emperor Qing searched the entire city for him, he could rely on a secret technique to transform into another person. It would be very difficult to catch Zhuan. This was also why Zhuan was not worried about revealing his true appearance in front of Moyen Wushang. In the imperial capital, it has been rumored that young Master Zhuo was killed by an expert from the Blue Dragon Hall. Moreover, young Master Zhuo was absent from the marquee battle for no reason. I thought it was true. Now it seems that it was just a rumor. Moyen Wushang quickly regained her composure. However, she did not lose her composure. Instead, her beautiful eyes flashed as she said, "It seems that young Master Zhuo wants to inquire about the whereabouts of Lu Hantan?" Zhuan looked at Moyen Wushang, who had quickly regained her composure. He nodded and said, "Yes. I think Miss Wushang won't refuse such a small matter, right?" Moyen Wushang covered her mouth and laughed. "It is indeed a small matter. Young Master Zhuo successfully opened the morning bell and evening drum. This young woman is very grateful. This young woman will not hide this matter from young Master Zhuo." At this point, Moyen Wushang's expression suddenly became serious. She said softly, "Tell me the truth. Lu Hantian's situation can't be considered good. After Lu Hantian went to the imperial capital a month ago, it was as if he had disappeared from the face of the earth. He has not appeared in the imperial capital since. Moreover, as far as I know, Lu Hantian seemed to have offended Emperor Qing for some reason. He was captured by Emperor Qing and thrown into the imperial capital's dungeon." The imperial capital's dungeon? Hearing this, Zhuowen's face turned slightly ugly. He knew quite a bit about the imperial capital's dungeon. It was said that the imperial capital's dungeon was built by the imperial family to imprison powerful cultivators. There was no lack of ultimate emperor realm cultivators and even some 4 venerable realm cultivators. These cultivators were basically villains who had committed heinous crimes or cultivators who were enemies of Emperor Qing. These people were basically mercilessly suppressed by Emperor Qing and could not appear outside for eternity. Instead, they were trapped in the dungeon for the rest of their lives. Moreover, this dungeon was personally designed by Emperor Qing. Not only were there many powerful guards inside, but it also contained all kinds of powerful mechanisms. Even a heavenly venerable realm cultivator would find it extremely difficult to break through the imperial capital's dungeon. Although Zhuowen knew that Lu Hantian's fate would not be good after Emperor Qing failed to extract the dragon soul from his body, he did not expect that Emperor Qing would throw him into the imperial capital's dungeon. This Emperor Qing is really ruthless. Zhuowen cursed in his heart. Although Zhuowen was extremely jealous of Emperor Qing, It was a pity that Emperor Qing was an Emperor realm cultivator. This kind of cultivator was like a mountain to him. It was impossible for him to be a match for Emperor Qing. It seems that I have to make a trip to the imperial capital's dungeon. Frowning slightly, Zhuan looked at Moyan Wushang and said, Miss Wushang, do you know the layout of the imperial capital's dungeon? After asking this question, Zhuan felt a little regretful. Although Moyan Wushang was extremely mysterious, the imperial capital's dungeon was designed by Emperor Qing. No matter how resourceful Moyan Wushang was, it was unlikely that she knew the specific layout. Moreover, Yun was undoubtedly hinting to Moyan Wushang that he was going to the imperial capital's dungeon to save someone. If Moyan Wushang revealed this matter to Emperor Qing in advance, wouldn't Zhuan be in danger? Moyan Wushang chuckled and raised her jade-like hand. Suddenly, a jade-colored scroll appeared in her palm. She said, This scroll records the layout of the imperial capital's dungeon. However, I have something that I need your help with. Looking at the scroll in Moyan Wushang's hand, Zhuan's eyes revealed a trace of joy. He did not expect Moyan Wushang to really have the layout of the imperial capital's dungeon. Zhuan could not help but think highly of Moyan Wushang. Miss Wushang, please tell me. Slowly calming down, Zhuan knew that Moyan Wushang had taken out such a precious layout of the dungeon. He was afraid that she would not give it up so easily. If you go to the imperial capital's dungeon, you can help me save someone. Moyan Wushang said indifferently. As expected, Zhuan's eyes slightly narrowed. He knew that Moyan Wushang would not give him the layout so easily. She actually wanted him to save someone in the imperial capital's dungeon. If Miss Wushang gives me the layout of the dungeon, I am willing to help you save someone. Zhuan was worried about Lu Hantian's safety. He did not hesitate to agree. You are indeed straightforward. This is a portrait of that person. As for the location of this person and Lu Hantian, I have already marked them in the layout. You only need to go to the marked location to save someone. Moyan Wushang said with a faint smile. Even the markings are marked. It seems that Moyan Wushang originally wanted to save this person. However, it just so happens that I need her help, so she asked me to save this person. Zhuan thought to himself. His gaze converged on the portrait in Moyan Wushang's hands. He saw that the portrait was of a middle-aged man. However, this middle-aged man had very long hair and a golden beard. He looked like a dignified lion. I will save this person as well. Now, Miss Wushang should give me the layout of the dungeon, right? Zhuan nodded and said with an expressionless face. Of course. Moyan Wushang waved her lily-white hand, and the jade-colored scroll was handed over to Zhuan. Taking the jade scroll, Zhuan's consciousness entered the scroll and silently browsed through its contents. There were indeed many diagrams drawn on the scroll. Zhuan could tell at a glance that these diagrams were the overall layout of a building. Zhuan knew that the contents of these drawings should be the overall layout of the imperial capital's dungeon. It was indeed very detailed. After looking at it, Zhuan let out a sigh of relief. There was a trace of shock in his eyes. This imperial capital's dungeon was simply a work of art. The structure inside was so complex that it almost made Zhuan gasp in amazement. From top to bottom, the imperial capital's dungeon was divided into 18 levels. The 18th level was thousands of feet underground. It was heavily guarded and there were countless experts. After looking at the layout of the dungeon in his hands, Zhuan's face became more and more unsightly. If he didn't have this layout, wanting to break into the imperial capital's dungeon was simply courting death. Even if he had this layout in his hands, he didn't have much confidence that he could successfully bring Lu Hantian out of the dungeon. Moyan Wushang also saw Zhuan's difficult expression. She chuckled and said, Actually, you don't have to be so anxious to save Lu Hantian. In the imperial capital's dungeon, Lu Hantian's life is not in danger. However, I heard that Qing Yan from the Azure Dragon Division took Qing Yi and Qing Wu and set off for Muqing County a month ago. It is said that they plan to capture the Ryuka descendants. Chapter 830. SS Teleportation Talisman. Based on Qing Yan's speed, he should have arrived in Muqing County by now. After saying this, Moyan Wushang looked at Zhuan with a meaningful gaze. The corners of his mouth revealed a faint smile. Zhuo Wen's expression was ugly. Muqing County was located in the southeast of the imperial capital county. It was quite far away. According to a normal journey, it would indeed take more than a month. If Qin Yan had set off a month ago, he would have already arrived in Muqing County. Blue Dragon Hall. Green eyes. Zhuo Wen's eyes narrowed as strands of killing intent surged out from his body. It was extremely terrifying. No. Right now, I need to hurry back to Muqing Prefecture. Zhuo Wen's eyes flickered. He was worried about the Zhuo family. He knew that the Azure Dragon Subpalace already knew that the Zhuo family was a descendant of the Ryuka. They would not let the Zhuo family go. Don't worry, young Master Zhuo. Even if you rush back now, it will take at least half a month. By then, the Blue Dragon Hall will have captured the Zhuo family. Moreover, I heard that because of Lu Hantian's disappearance, Muqing County has fallen into a state of chaos. Because of you, Grand Haohai has gathered the Chao and Feng families to attack Muqing County. Moyan Wushang's words made Zhuo Wen's pupils shrink. Zhuo Wen's heart burned even more fiercely. Grand Haohai was getting more and more insatiable. Zhuo knew that he was a descendant of the Ryuka because of Grand Haohai, which caused him to be encircled by the Azure Dragon Subpalace and almost die. Moreover, Grand Haohai had interfered when the Azure Emperor wanted to strip the dragon soul from his body. Now, Grand Haohai had joined forces with the Chao and Feng families to attack Muqing County. At this moment, Zhuo Wen's murderous intent towards Grand Haohai had reached its peak. He would not let Grand Haohai and the Grand Haohai family go. After all, Muqing County was bestowed to Lu Nantian by the Qing Emperor, right? Is the Azure Emperor not going to do anything about Grand Haohai's brazen intentions? Zhuan asked in a deep voice. Moyan Wushang shook his head and said, "It's useless." Lu Nantian was the lord of Muqing County. Unfortunately, he was already dead. And the #1 expert of Muqing County, Lu Hantian, has been secretly imprisoned by the Azure Emperor. Now that Muqing County is without a leader, do you think the Azure Emperor will care? Moyan Wushang's words made Zhuo Wen's heart sink even more. It seemed like the Azure Emperor had already tacitly approved of Grand Haohai's actions. When did Grand Haohai set off? Zhuo Wen asked with an ugly expression. The one who set off with Qin Yan should have reached Muqing County by now. Moyan Wushang said calmly. Damn it. I have to go to Muqing County. Even if it's too late, I have to go. Zhuo Wen muttered in a low voice and turned around to leave. However, he was stopped by Moyan Wushang. Miss Wushang, what is the meaning of this? Zhuo Wen snorted coldly. Moyan Wushang's gaze was calm and the corners of his mouth curled up into a smile. He opened his jade-like hand and there was a golden talisman in his palm that was emitting a brilliant golden light. This is a teleportation talisman. It can teleport you 100,000 miles away. The imperial capital county is only 100,000 miles away from Muqing County. With this teleportation talisman, you can quickly reach Muqing County. With a flick of his finger, Moyan Wushang handed the teleportation talisman to Zhuo Wen. Teleportation talisman? It can teleport you 100,000 miles away? Looking at the ordinary-looking golden talisman in his palm, Zhuo Wen's eyes were filled with shock. This teleportation talisman was so magical that it could teleport you 100,000 miles away. Generally, treasures with this kind of teleportation ability were extremely precious and rare. However, Moyan Wushang had given this item to Zhuo Wen. This was obviously beyond Zhuo Wen's expectations. Although Zhuo Wen had helped Moyan Wushang to open the morning bell and evening drum, Moyan Wushang had also helped Zhuo Wen enter the mysterious comprehending realm. Moyan Wushang did not owe him anything. However, Moyan Wushang had helped him in every aspect and had even given this teleportation talisman to Zhuo Wen. This was too good. Zhuo Wen did not think that his relationship with Moyan Wushang could be so good. Miss Wushang, although we are friends, for you to give me such a precious item for no reason, I am filled with doubts. Zhuo Wen cautiously said. Moyan Wushang began to laugh and said, I'm not helping you because of you, I'm helping you because of big sister Qinshui. Qinshui? You're talking about Mu Qinshui? Could it be you're someone from the Divine Arts Academy? Zhuo Wen's eyes lit up. He finally understood why Moyan Wushang was helping him. It was all because of Mu Qinshui. Good. It seems like you're not a fool. I am indeed a disciple of the Divine Arts Academy. In the academy, Big Sister Chen Shui has never forgotten you. After saying this, Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes were filled with a sly look as he continued. Moreover, not only is Big Sister Chen Shui beautiful, her aura is as pure as a lotus. There are many pursuers in the academy. Adding in the fact that Big Sister Chen Shui often mentions your name, although you're not in the Divine Arts Academy, your name Zhuowen is already famous in the academy. There are many geniuses in the academy who are gnashing their teeth at you, wishing they could trample you under their feet. Hearing this, Zhuowen revealed a bitter smile. He never thought that before he even entered the Divine Arts Academy, he would already be famous. It seemed like Mu Chenxue had attracted quite a bit of hatred for him in the academy. Moyan Wushang suddenly changed his calm demeanor and patted Zhuowen's shoulder in a heroic manner. He said with a laugh, "You have to work hard. The geniuses of the Divine Arts Academy are not things your Qingxian Empire can compare to. Although your strength is not bad, I'm afraid you don't even have the qualifications to enter the inner court. If you don't want to be beaten in the academy, you should quickly increase your cultivation." Moyan Wushang's sudden change in temperament made Zhuowen stunned. Could it be that Moyan Wushang's calm demeanor from before was just an act? Many thanks for Miss Wushang's reminder. Right now I have to make a trip back to Muqing County. As for the Divine Arts Academy, I'll be there soon. Cupping his hands, Zhuowen's face was filled with gratitude. Since Moyan Wushang was Mu Chenxue's friend, then Zhuowen did not have any doubts in his heart. He happily accepted the latter's transfer talisman. Go. If you go now, you might still be able to make it. Moyan Wushang nodded and said in a serious voice. Nodding his head, Zhuowen suddenly crushed the golden talisman. Instantly, countless rays of golden light shot out, turning into a golden pillar of light that soared into the sky. In the middle of this golden pillar of light, Zhuowen's figure gradually disappeared. This Zhuowen's cultivation is advancing so quickly. In just a month he's already at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. Coupled with the assistance of the dragon soul in his body, I'm afraid his current battle strength has become extremely terrifying. After Zhuowen left, Moyan Wushang's eyes revealed a trace of pondering. Although Zhuowen had concealed his own aura, Moyan Wushang's perception was very strong. With a glance, he saw through Zhuowen's true cultivation, and his eyes revealed a trace of surprise. She knew that a month ago, Zhuowen was only a half-step warrior in the Xuanzuan realm. But now, he had directly advanced to the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. His speed was so fast that it was almost shocking. This kind of advancement speed, even in the inner courtyard, I'm afraid he's among the best. I'm really looking forward to the scene after this guy enters the Divine Arts Academy. Thinking of the countless pursuers of Mu Chenxue in the academy, who would not be tired of finding trouble with Yun, Moyan Wushang's heart was incomparably happy. Muqing County. At this moment, the county capital was gloomy and gloomy. All the warriors in the county capital raised their heads, and their eyes were filled with worry. At the center of the provincial capital, the towering Origin Qi Tower was currently flickering with an extremely blazing white light. This white light soared into the sky and turned into a white tortoiseshell-like protective barrier, enveloping the entire provincial capital. Around the Vitality Tower, the big shots in the county capital had basically gathered. The three magnates, the master of the meteorite of the Jade Lady Star Court, the master of the ruling sword faction, and Mark Yongxing, were quietly floating above the Vitality Tower. Beside the three magnates, Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and LV Tao were silently following. After the three of them returned, they gathered the three magnates and told them everything that had happened in the imperial city. The three magnates heard that not only had Zhuowen led Muqing County to second place in the Battle of the 9 Counties, but he had also entered the top 3 in the ranking battle. Moreover, even the first prince of the imperial family, Huangfu Wudao, was unable to do anything to Zhuowen. The three magnates were finally shocked. Until now, they still couldn't believe that what LV Tao and the other two had said was true. Although they recognized Zhuowen's talent, what Zhuowen had done in the imperial city was too sensational. For the geniuses of the other 8 counties outside of the imperial city, Being able to enter the top 10 of the Green Emperor list was already a great honor and a blessing. However, not only had Zhuowen entered the top 10, but he had also entered the top 3 with irresistible force. He had the qualifications to be conferred the title of Marquis, and even Huangfu Wudao was unable to do anything to Zhuowen. However, what happened next made the three magnates' hearts sink. Zhuowen's identity as a descendant of the Ryuka was exposed, and he was hunted down by the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall. In the end, he was killed. It wasn't easy for such a peerless genius to appear in Muqing County, but he had actually died in the imperial city. How could they not be heartbroken? However, what shocked them even more was Zhuowen's identity. He was actually a descendant of the Ryuka, and Zhuowen also had a dragon soul in his body. It was no wonder that the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall had come looking for him. Moreover, even the county lord of Muqing County, Lu Nantian, had died in the imperial city. The three magnates were incomparably indignant. Originally, they thought that the matter would be settled because of this. However, today, they discovered that Qin Yen had led the experts from the Azure Dragon Hall and joined forces with the Grand Clan, Chao Clan and Feng Clan to invade their county. They wanted to take over their county completely. Fortunately, their county had a precious treasure like the Vitality Tower. The Vitality Tower had a defensive formation that could envelop the entire county. Although Qin Yen, Glan Haohai, and the others were very strong, they couldn't break through the defensive formation in a short time. However, the hearts of many warriors in the county gradually sank. Although the defensive formation was very strong, it couldn't exist indefinitely. In addition, Qin Yen and the others had joined forces with 4 experts of the Venerable Realm. The defensive formation couldn't be maintained for long. Chapter 8:31. Ryuka descendants. Qin Yen floated silently in the air above the prefecture capital. Behind him stood Qin Yi and Su Lingtian. Behind the three of them was a group of 50 warriors in green armor. These warriors all had powerful auras. They were the elite warriors of the Azure Dragon Sub-Hall. In addition to the warriors of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qin Yen brought, the Glan, Feng, and Chao families also brought their own elites. Glan Lily stood silently beside Glan Haohai, looking down at the prefecture capital. The primordial Qi Tower in the capital of Muqing County is a treasure. The protective formation it produces is actually so powerful. Qin Yen looked down at the protective formation below with blazing eyes. Su Lingtian smiled and said, "Lord Qin Yen, you may not know this, but the Vitality Tower has been passed down since ancient times. There are many treasures and inherited secret techniques inside. If we can seize the prefecture capital, the Vitality Tower will be of great benefit to the Blue Dragon Hall." Su Lingtian was originally from Marquis Baichuan's residence in Muqing Prefecture, so he naturally knew about the Vitality Tower. Now that Qin Yen asked about it, he naturally explained it to him with a flattering smile. "Isn't the Blue Dragon Hall looking for the Ryuka descendants? Why are you trying to snatch the origin Qi Tower from our 3 great clans?" Glan Haohai led Feng Tian and Chao Ji in front of Qin Yen and the others. Looking at the alliance of the 3 families, Qin Yen narrowed his eyes and sneered, "Everyone has a share. The Vitality Tower is a treasure passed down from ancient times. You can't take it all for yourselves. Why don't we work together to break this defensive formation? All 4 of us will have a share of the Vitality Tower." Moreover, I heard that Lu Nanshan's son, LV Tao, secretly brought the Zhuo family to the house of Marquis Qin in order to help the dead Zhuowen. By breaking this defensive formation, we can also find the Ryuka descendants. Hearing this, the corners of Grand Haohai's mouth curled up slightly. It seemed that Qin Yen had placed some spies in Muqing County. Otherwise, it would be impossible for him to know that the Ryuka descendants were hidden in Muqing County by LV Tao. The Elemental Tower is very big. It's indeed very difficult for our 3 great families to completely divide it up. With your Blue Dragon Hall, it's just right. However, the most important thing now is for us to work together to break this defensive formation. Glan Haohai smiled and agreed to Qin Yan's proposal. Although the 3 great clans had joined forces, their might was much stronger than Qin Yan's team. However, The Blue Dragon Hall's influence in the Imperial City was above their three great clans, so they couldn't afford to offend them too much. Do it. Otherwise, things might change if we delay. Qin Yan nodded, then cast a sidelong glance at Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian behind him. The two of them nodded and stepped forward. Terrifying auras surged from their bodies. At the same time that Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian stepped forward, Grand Hao Hai, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji stepped forward as well. Similarly, terrifying auras surged from their bodies. The five of them were the strongest people who had come to the Imperial City this time. If they worked together, they should be able to break through the defensive formation. Within the defensive formation, the Master of the Meteorite, Marquis Yongsheng Qinye, and Sect Master Xinyuan Li of the Imperial Sword Sect also saw the actions of Grand Hao Hai and the others. Their faces instantly turned ghastly pale. Qin Yi, Su Ling Tian, Grand Hao Hai, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji all emitted terrifying auras. They could naturally tell that the defensive formation really wouldn't be able to last for long if the five of them worked together. What should we do? The Master of the Meteorite asked in a slightly panicked manner. Xinyuan Li's face was sunken, and his complexion did not look any better. As for the Marquis of Yongsheng Qinye, his gaze was dark as he said, "Didn't the Blue Dragon Hall come this time for the Ryuka descendants? If we hand over the Zhuo family, perhaps the Blue Dragon Hall will withdraw because of this, and the pressure on us will lessen by a lot." Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and LV Tao's faces changed drastically when they heard Qinye's words. LV Tao said with a deep voice, "Marquis Qin, this is not feasible. The Zhuo family is Zhuowen's clansmen. I will not hand them over. Zhuan is already dead. Why are you still protecting their clansmen? It's not worth risking your lives for this." Qin Ye snorted coldly. With a stomp of his foot, he actually turned into a streak of light and shot towards the house of Marquis Qin. Marquis Qin, LV Tao's eyes narrowed. With a stomp of his foot, he also turned into a streak of light and caught up to Qin Ye. He stared at Qin Ye coldly. "LV Tao, you're not my match. You'd better get out of my way. Otherwise, this Marquis can't guarantee that you won't be injured." Qin Ye's gaze became incomparably gloomy. Ever since he knew that Qin Batian had died in the Battle of the Nine Counties, Qin Ye's personality had become even more eccentric. In particular, the more he looked at the other geniuses of Muqing County, the more he disliked them. Although Zhuowen's performance in the imperial capital was extremely gratifying, Qin Ye felt an indescribable jealousy in his heart. The son he had painstakingly raised had died in the Battle of the Nine Counties, and a lowly commoner from a low-level city had actually entered the top 3 of the Azure Emperor rankings. He naturally felt extremely uncomfortable in his heart. Now that the Blue Dragon Hall had come to ask for them, Qin Ye naturally couldn't waste his energy to protect those good-for-nothing Zhuo family clansmen. Swoosh swoosh. 2 more figures blocked in front of Qin Ye. These two were naturally Luo Xing and Qing Lian. The 2 women's faces were also filled with shock and anger. Marquis Qin Yun painstakingly obtained 2nd place in the Battle of the Nine Counties for our Muqing County. How can you treat his Zhuo family like this? Even if Zhuowen's whereabouts are unknown, we shouldn't betray him, Luo Xing said with a murderous look in her beautiful eyes. Betray him? That Zhuowen is already dead. Why should we protect his family for him? Also, the Blue Dragon Hall and the 3 families have come to attack Muqing County largely because of that Zhuowen. If it weren't for that Zhuowen, would our Muqing County have fallen to such a state? Qin Ye's face was filled with a cold smile. He stomped his foot, and the aura of a peak ultimate level 9 Wheels Emperor burst out. He said coldly, "If you don't get out of my way, don't blame me for being impolite." The Master of the Meteorite, who was originally watching from the side, saw that Luo Xing and Qing Lian had actually made a move to stop Qin Ye. Her beautiful eyes flickered, and a beam of starlight shot out from her sleeve, binding Luo Xing and Qing Lian and pulling them to her side. "Master, why are you doing this? We can't hand over Zhuowen's family." Bound by the starlight, Luo Xing and Qing Lian couldn't move at all. Their eyes were filled with shock and anger as they looked at the Master of the Meteorite beside them in disbelief. Luo Xing, Qing Lian, it's best if you don't interfere in this matter, The master of the meteorite shook her head and said with a heavy heart. Seeing the master of the meteorite's appearance, the two women also knew that the master of the meteorite had agreed with Qin Ye's approach. She planned to hand over the Zhuo family in hopes that the Blue Dragon Hall would retreat. LV Tao, I think you should get out of the way. Don't force us to make a move. A frenzied beam of sword light shot over. The master of the ruling sword sect, Xinyuan Li, came to Qin Ye's side and stared indifferently at LV Tao. Brother Xinyuan, I thought you were going to be a nice guy and stop me. Now it seems that I was wrong. Looking at Xinyuan Li beside him, the corners of Qin Ye's mouth curled up slightly as he spoke somewhat mockingly. Xinyuan Li's face was cold as she said without turning her head, "The enemy is right in front of us. Of course, we won't bother about these trivial matters." LV Tao's face was pale. He didn't expect that even Xinyuan Li was going to make a move. However, LV Tao didn't retreat. Instead, he stomped his foot and the aura of the ultimate seven-wheel emperor realm burst out. Your actions have already proven your answer. Since that's the case, don't blame us for bullying a junior like you. Xinyuan Li narrowed her eyes. She stomped her foot and the long sword on her back immediately unsheathed. It turned into a rain of swords that filled the sky and swept straight towards LV Tao. The terrifying sword chi cut through the void as if it wanted to crush the sky. LV Tao roared angrily and released endless origin energy. It formed a layer of astral wind shield on the surface of his body in an attempt to block the rain of swords. Bang! Unfortunately, the gap between LV Tao and Xinyuan Li was too great. The astral wind shield didn't last long before it was broken by the rain of swords. Xinyuan Li spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. Brother Qin, let's enter the house of Marquis Qin. After repelling LV Tao, Xinyuan Li's expression was cold. She didn't continue to pursue. Instead, she turned into a stream of light and entered the house of Marquis Qin. Qin Ye looked meaningfully at the seriously injured LV Tao not far away. He stomped his foot and followed Xinyuan Li into the house of Marquis Qin. After a while, Qin Ye and Xinyuan Li brought out a huge cage made of origin energy from the house of Marquis Qin. The people inside the cage were all members of the Zhuo family, including Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuo Baitin, and other high-ranking members of the Zhuo family. The younger generation represented by Zhuo Xiangding and Zhuo Mei were gathered behind Zhuo Xiangding and the others. Their eyes were filled with anger. They were picked up by LV Tao from Ratan Armor City. Moreover, LV Tao did treat them with good intentions, which made them have a good impression of him. Of course, the main reason they came to the house of Marquis Qin was to see Jun. After all, the battle of the 9 counties was over, and Jun should have returned. LV Tao didn't tell the Zhuo family about Zhuowen's death. Instead, he said that Zhuowen was delayed by something and would take more than half a year to return. Zhuo Xiangding and the others didn't suspect anything. Instead, they patiently waited for Zhuowen's return in the house of Marquis Qin. However, the sudden activation of the Origin Energy Tower's defensive formation today also attracted the attention of Zhuo Xiangding and the others. Although they didn't know why this happened, they knew that the prefecture capital had encountered some kind of problem. They also knew that they were weak and couldn't help much, so they didn't come out of the house of Marquis Qin. However, Qin Ye and Xinyuan Li suddenly broke in and captured all their family members indiscriminately. This made the Zhuo family very angry and even a little confused. Marquis Qin and Patriarch Xinyuan, what do you mean by this? Why did you capture our Zhuo family members? And where did young Master LV Tao go? Zhuo Xiangding, the supreme leader of the Zhuo family, asked calmly. Xinyuan Li's face was cold and indifferent. Qin Ye sneered and said, "Don't pretend. Your Zhuo family is the descendant of the Ryuka." Chapter 8:32. Protective Array. Zhuo Xiangding and the others were bewildered. The fact that the Zhuo family was a Ryuka descendant was a secret. No one else knew about it, so how did Qin Ye know? Do you know why the protective array of the Vitality Tower was activated? The Blue Dragon Hall of the Imperial Capital has come to capture you Ryuka descendants. Because you implicated our prefecture, we had no choice but to hand you over, Qin Ye said with an indifferent smile. Zhuo Xiangding's expression was ugly as he asked, "How did the Blue Dragon Hall know about this?" Zhuo Xiangding knew that since the Blue Dragon Hall had come to capture them, they had clearly confirmed the fact that they were Ryuka descendants. However, he was still puzzled. The Zhuo family had been extremely low-key for so many years, so how did the Blue Dragon Hall know about their identity as Ryuka descendants? The secret of your family's genius, Zhuan, having a dragon soul, was revealed. I heard that he was surrounded and killed by the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall. Does the Zhuo family still dare to deny it? Qin Ye sneered. What? The Blue Dragon Hall discovered Zhuowen's dragon soul and killed him? When Qin Ye said this, Zhuo Xiangding and the rest of the family fell silent. Their eyes were filled with grief and indignation. They also didn't expect that Zhuowen's dragon soul would be discovered by the Blue Dragon Hall. They were well aware of how terrifying the Blue Dragon Hall was. If they really sent experts to surround and kill him, Zhuowen's chances of survival were indeed very slim. Did LV Tao invite the Zhuo family to the prefecture capital to capture us all in one fell swoop? The young and impetuous Zhuo Tian suddenly stepped forward and asked in a somewhat hoarse voice. Qin Ye's lips curled into a mocking smile. He shook his head and said, "No, LV Tao treated you sincerely. However, with the enemy before us, what's the use of him objecting? He's just a junior." Hearing those words, the members of the Zhuo family also saw the injured LV Tao. Their eyes flickered, and they knew that they had misunderstood LV Tao. Boom, boom. In an instant, the defensive formation shook violently. Grand Haohai, Qing Yi, and the other four had joined forces to attack the defensive formation. They're making their move. We must take these Zhuo family members and negotiate with them. Shen Yuanli came to Qin Ye's side and said solemnly. Qin Ye nodded. With a wave of his right hand, he lifted the Yuan Qi prison that bound the Zhuo family members and followed Shen Yuanli to the top of the tower. The master of the meteorite's beautiful eyes flickered as she slowly followed behind Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli with the imprisoned Qing Lian and Luo Xing. At this moment, Grand Haohai and the other four on the defensive formation also noticed Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli at the top of the Origin Qi Tower below. At the same time, they also noticed the Zhuo family members tied up by Qin Ye. "My lords, can we negotiate?" Qin Ye said loudly. Hearing this, Grand Haohai and the other four stopped what they were doing and looked down at Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli mockingly. Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli were only at the pinnacle of the ultimate ninth wheel emperor stage. To the five of them, they were as insignificant as ants. Qin Yen looked past the five of them and looked down at Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli. He said indifferently, "Negotiate? Do you think the two of you are qualified to negotiate with me?" Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli's expressions changed slightly at Qin Yan's words. However, Qin Ye's expression did not change. Instead, he smiled fawningly and said, "You must be Lord Qin Yen of the Blue Dragon Hall. We know the purpose of your visit, Lord Qin Yen. You must be here for the Ryuka descendants, right? Now, I have all the Ryuka descendants in my hands. We are willing to offer these Ryuka descendants to you with both hands. We only ask that Lord Qin Yen let go of our prefecture capital." Qin Ye's posture was very humble, and he had a fawning smile on his face. This servile attitude attracted LV Tao's disdainful gaze. This Qin Ye is really shameless. Unfortunately, LV Tao was seriously injured and could not fight at all. Now, he was supported by the other geniuses of the house of Marquis Qin. He could only silently watch Qin Ye and Shen Yuanli negotiate with Qin Yen. They are the Ryuka descendants? Qin Yen glanced at the elemental energy prison in Qin Ye's hand, but his gaze was fixed on Grand Haohai. He knew that the Grant family and the Zhuo family had been friends for generations. They should be very familiar with the Zhuo family. Grant Haohai nodded at Qin Yen, then looked at Zhuo Xiangding in the elemental energy prison. He smiled and said, "Old man Zhuo, I haven't seen you for more than 20 years. Your bones are quite healthy." Zhuo Xiangding looked deeply at Grand Haohai. He took a deep breath and asked, "Grand Haohai, was it you who tipped off the Blue Dragon Hall about Zhuowen's dragon soul?" Although Zhuowen's temperament was sometimes quite stubborn, his style of doing things was extremely steady. He did not believe that the former would give himself away so easily and let the Blue Dragon Hall discover his identity as a Ryuka descendant. Therefore, Zhuo Xiangding had long suspected that someone might have tipped off Zhuan, and this person was undoubtedly Grant Haohai. The corners of Grant Haohai's mouth curled up slightly. He suddenly laughed and said, "Old man, you must be joking." The reason why Zhuan was discovered was mainly because he was too arrogant and didn't know how to restrain himself. "This has nothing to do with me." Zhuo Xiangding sneered and said, 20 years ago, Xiao Tian suddenly disappeared in the imperial capital. Moreover, it was said that his dragon soul was being hunted down by the Blue Dragon Hall. I know that this has a lot to do with you. 20 years have passed. You didn't even let Xiao Yan's son go. Now you plan to make a move against our Zhuo family? Speaking up to here, Zhuo Xiangding suddenly said with full vigor, "Grant Haohai, my Zhuo family treated your Grant family well. Xiao Tian even treated you as a brother. That's why he went to the imperial capital alone with you to help you establish the Grant family. But what about you? Is this how you treat Xiao Tian, his son, and his family?" Grant Haohai narrowed his eyes, which contained a trace of coldness. He said indifferently, "Old man Zhuo, you're exaggerating. You can't speak without evidence. I didn't know anything about Xiao Yan's disappearance back then. As for Zhuan, I said that it was because he didn't know how to restrain himself that the Blue Dragon Hall had something on him. What does that have to do with me, Grant Haohai?" Grant Haohai didn't say anything else. He stood silently among the 5 people. He wanted to see how Qin Ye was going to negotiate with them. Qin Yen glanced meaningfully at Zhuo Xiangding and Grant Haohai. He knew that the Grant family and the Zhuo family had a secret that they didn't know about. However, Qin Yen didn't ask. This was someone else's private matter. He was just an outsider and naturally couldn't interfere. Right now, his priority was to take down the Ryuka remnants. Looking back at Qin Ye, Qin Yen said indifferently, "We have 2 goals in coming to the imperial capital. One is to capture the Ryuka remnants, and the other is the Origin Chi Pagoda. If you can hand over the Origin Chi Pagoda with both hands, we can consider not invading your territory." When Qin Yen said this, Qin Ye, Xinyuan Li, and the Master of the Meteorites' expressions changed. The Origin Chi Pagoda was the foundation of the imperial capital. It was also the foundation that ensured the prosperity of the imperial capital's geniuses. If the Origin Chi Pagoda was taken away by Qin Yen, their imperial capital's foundation would be unstable. At that time, it would be much more difficult to nurture geniuses. Don't tell me you don't want to? With our lineup, it's only a matter of time before we blast open this protective array. Once we break in, it's hard to guarantee that we won't start a massacre, so I know you're all smart people and know the right choice. Seeing Qin Ye and the others hesitate, Qin Yen sneered and his voice became extremely cold, containing a touch of cruel killing intent. Qin Ye and Xinyuan Li's expressions changed slightly. Exchanging a glance, Qin Ye gritted his teeth and said, "We're willing to give you the Origin Chi Pagoda, but after you enter the imperial capital, you must not touch our ever-flourishing Marquis Mansion, the Imperial Sword School, and the Jade Maiden Star Court." Seeing Qin Ye agree, Qin Yan's expression relaxed slightly. "Of course. Our goal is only the Ryuka remnants and the Origin Chi Pagoda. As long as you know what's good for you, we naturally won't touch your forces." "Then thank you, Lord Qin Yen." Qin Ye smiled flatteringly. Qin Yen snorted and said indifferently, "Then can you open the protective array now? Do you want us to stand outside?" "Marquis Qin, don't open it. Once you do, you'll regret it." Just as Qin Ye was about to open the protective array, LV Tao, who was supported by the geniuses of the house of Marquis Qin, suddenly shouted, wanting to stop Qin Ye. Qin Yen glanced at LV Tao and continued, "Don't lose your life because of the words of some clowns. I've said before, if you don't open it when we break the array, your forces can forget about existing in the imperial capital. Open it and I can spare your forces." Qin Ye and Xinyuan Li nodded and did not stop because of LV Tao's words. The 2 of them repeatedly made hand seals and slapped the top of the Origin Chi Pagoda. Suddenly, The protective array covering the top of the Origin Chi pagoda completely collapsed into nothingness at this moment. Looking at the dispersing protective array, Qin Yen revealed a faintly discernible smile and immediately led Qin Yi and the others to land on top of the Origin Chi pagoda. Glan Haohai and the others also entered the Origin Chi pagoda. Lord Qin Yen, these are the remnants of the Ryuka family. I'll leave them to you. Qin Ye came in front of Qin Yen with a fawning smile. With a wave of his right hand, he handed the Origin Chi prison to Qin Yen, his face full of flattery. Taking the Origin Chi prison, Qin Yen faintly glanced at the members of the Zhou family glaring angrily in the cage. The smile on his lips deepened, and he patted Qin Ye's shoulder. You've done well. It's my honor to be able to work for Lord Qin Yen. Qin Ye hurriedly nodded and bowed. The fawning smile on his face deepened, as if he was the most loyal dog. Bang! At this moment, Qin Yan's right hand clenched into a fist and smashed into Qin Ye's lower dantian without warning. Powerful Origin Chi invaded and directly destroyed Qin Ye's dantian. Qin Ye's eyes bulged as he looked at Qin Yen in disbelief. He really couldn't understand why Qin Yen would suddenly attack him. You've made us wait for so long in the protective array. You've also committed a great sin. Consider this a small punishment. Chapter 8:33. Qin Tian transforming into a dragon. Qin Ye collapsed to the ground, his body trembling. He still couldn't believe that Qin Yen had crippled him. When he saw Qin Ye being crippled, the nearby Xianyuan Li's pupils constricted, and he actually hurriedly covered himself in boundless sword qi as he retreated repeatedly, and his eyes were filled with fear. Why did you do this? We've already opened the defensive formation for you and even handed over the Ryuka bloodline. Why did you cripple me? Qin Ye still couldn't believe it. He shouted hysterically, his voice full of shock and anger. You're so stupid. Do you believe what we said? Did I promise you anything? Qin Yen sneered. Qin Yi, take that guy down and cripple him as well. I have personally come to the county capital. Not only did these magnates of the county capital not come out to welcome me, they even used a defensive formation to obstruct me. They deserve to die. Crippling their cultivation is already the greatest mercy I can give them. Qin Yen pointed at the retreating Xianyuan Li and ordered Qin Yi behind him. Qin Yi nodded and quickly rushed towards Xianyuan Li. Seeing Qin Yi rushing over, Xianyuan Li's face changed. Qin Yen didn't intend to let him go. This made him angry and shocked. At the same time, there was a trace of regret in his heart. If he had listened to Lve Tao and didn't open the defensive formation to let Qin Yen and the others in, the capital could still hold on for more than half a month. But now, in order to please Qin Yen, not only did he help Qin Ye hand over the Ryuka bloodline, but he also opened the defensive formation to let the tiger go back to the mountain. He didn't expect that he would harm himself. Qin Yen actually attacked the two of them as soon as he came in. Sword crossing the world. Xianyuan Li shouted angrily. Countless sword qi gushed out and turned into a huge long sword under his feet. With a swoosh, the long sword turned into a streamer and flew into the distance with a long tail behind it. Sky Crossing Sword was one of the more powerful body-type armor-type techniques of the Imperial Sword School. It could transform one sword aura into a long sword and unleash an extremely fast speed. Qin Yi snorted coldly, unwilling to be outdone. His right hand formed a claw, and a burst of green light burst out, turning into a huge dragon shadow under his feet. Stepping on the dragon shadow, Qin Yi's speed soared to an extremely terrifying level. He was even much faster than Xianyuan Li. Qin Yi caught up to Xianyuan Li within 10 breaths of time. His right hand formed a claw and grabbed at Xianyuan Li. Xianyuan Li could not resist at all. The difference between the two was too great. After grabbing Xianyuan Li, Qin Yi's face was cold. He turned into a green shadow and arrived in front of Qin Yen. He threw Xianyuan Li in front of Qin Yen and said, "Master Qin Yen, you can do whatever you want with him." Xianyuan Li's whole body trembled. The people from the Blue Dragon Hall were too strong. Even if he used his strongest movement technique, Sword Crossing Heaven, he still couldn't escape from the hands of the experts from the Blue Dragon Hall. At this moment, Xianyuan Li had already given up. I'll give you two choices. Destroy your own cultivation or die. Choose for yourself. Qin Yan stared at Xian Yuanli indifferently. His voice sounded in Xian Yuanli's ears, causing the latter's face to turn ugly. What? It seems that you want to die? In that case, I'll fulfill your wish. The smile on Qin Yan's face grew wider. Yunli gathered in the palm of his right hand like a whirlpool. I'll destroy my own cultivation. Seeing that Qin Yan was about to make a move, Xian Yuanli made a prompt decision. He raised his hands and then fiercely hit his lower abdomen. There was a crack, like the sound of glass breaking. Xian Yuanli spat out blood. His dantian had been completely shattered by him. From now on, he would be a cripple. The master of the meteorite, who was originally quite far away, slowly retreated. As early as when Qin Ye was destroyed by Qin Yan, the master of the meteorite had already found that something was wrong, so she quietly retreated. At this moment, the master of the meteorite and Qin Yan were hundreds of miles away. Taking advantage of the time when Qin Yan and the others' attention was on Xian Yuanli, the master of the meteorite quickly took Qin Lian and Luo Xing to leave this place. When did the master of the meteorite become so timid? Just when the master of the meteorite was about to leave this place, a harsh voice came, causing the master of the meteorite's delicate body to tremble slightly. She turned around and took Qin Lian and Luo Xing back dozens of steps. She looked at the figure that appeared in front of her with a dignified look. This person was extremely ugly and had only one arm. It was Su Lingtian, who had almost killed Zhuowen with a sneak attack. Are you also a member of the Blue Dragon Hall? The master of the meteorite protected Qin Lian and Luo Xing and asked coldly. It doesn't matter who I am. What's important is that the three of you can't escape. Follow me to where Master Qin Yan is. Su Lingtian glanced indifferently at the three of them. With a wave of his sleeve, a terrifying yuan power gushed out. It was like a flood and ferocious beast as it wrapped around the meteorite garden's master. The master of the meteorite's face changed slightly. She stretched out her hands and endless starlight swept out, forming countless starry zones around her to protect her body. Unfortunately, Su Lingtian was a supreme being after all, who was many times more powerful than the master of the meteorite. The terrifying primary energy poured out, and the starlight in front of the master of the meteorite was shattered like paper. Spitting out a mouthful of blood, the master of the meteorite retreated continuously. Then, a huge primary energy hand came and grabbed her. Su Lingtian took advantage of the momentum and carried her in front of Qin Yan. As for Luo Xing and Qin Lian, their cultivation levels were too low, so Su Lingtian didn't take them seriously. Therefore, he didn't lock them up. Master Qin Yan, this woman is the master of the meteorite, the leader of the last superpower in the prefecture, the Jade Lady Garden. She's at your disposal. Su Lingtian casually threw the master of the meteorite in front of Qin Yan. Then, he cupped his hands and stood silently behind Qin Yan. Qin Yan nodded to Su Lingtian and said to the master of the meteorite, "My request is the same. You either destroy your own cultivation or die." The master of the meteorite's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and decisively destroyed her own cultivation. At this point, the leaders of the superpowers in the prefecture were either dead or destroyed. They were basically no longer a threat. A wise man submits to circumstances. Qin Yan's lips curled slightly. Then, she ordered the guards of the Blue Dragon Hall to carry Xian Yuanli, Qin Ye, and the master of the meteorite in her hands. She stood in the sky above the prefecture and shouted. Her voice was like rolling thunder, filling the sky above the prefecture. Warriors of the prefecture, listen carefully, we are from the Blue Dragon Hall of the Imperial City, as well as 3 of the 5 major families, the Grant family, the Chao family, and the Feng family. The purpose of our visit this time is to accept your Muqin County and the Origin Qi Tower in the county capital. As soon as she said this, countless warriors in the prefecture came out. They looked up at Qin Yan and the others in the sky with anger in their eyes. But soon, these warriors saw Xian Yuanli, Qin Ye, and the master of the meteorite in the hands of the warriors of the Blue Dragon Hall. The anger in their eyes turned into shock. Marquis Yongsheng Qinye, the leader of the ruling sword sect, Xinyuan Li, and the master of the meteorite of the Jade Lady Star Court were all captured alive by them? This is so powerful. The 5 major families of the Imperial City and the Blue Dragon Hall are so powerful. The 3 leaders are the strongest of the superpowers, but they are being casually carried in their hands. Everyone, don't be afraid. We still have Lu Nantian, the Marquis of Muqin, and Lord Lu Hantian, the peerless genius from the land of blood demons. It is said that Lord Lu Hantian is at the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. When Lord Lu Hantian comes back, these people won't dare to be presumptuous here. The strength of Qin Yen and the others had indeed shocked many warriors in the prefecture, but they were full of confidence in Lu Nantian and Lu Hantian. Not to mention Lu Nantian, Lu Hantian's Celestial Master Realm cultivation was known by almost everyone in the prefecture when they besieged the Marquis Mansion of Baichuan. Everyone knew that there was a powerful Celestial Master hidden in the house of Marquis Qin. Qin Yen sneered and continued to shout, "Do you still have hope in Lu Nantian and Lu Hantian? I'll tell you the truth. Lu Nantian was killed by the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall in the Imperial City, and Lu Hantian was captured by Emperor Qing and locked in the dungeon of the Imperial City, never to see the light of day again. Do you still think these 2 people can appear?" Once these words were spoken, it immediately caused a frenzied uproar among the provincial capital's martial artists. Everyone revealed shocked expressions. Lu Nantian is dead, and Lu Hantian is imprisoned by Emperor Qing? How could this be? Is this person making things up? Looking at the doubtful crowd below, Qin Yen did not have much patience. He said to Qin Yi, "Use your strongest attack and destroy the house of Marquis Qin. I want these ignorant warriors in the prefecture to know if what I said is true." Qin Yi nodded. He took a step forward and instantly arrived in the sky above Mu Qin Marquis Mansion. His hands formed seals repeatedly. Immediately, waves of terrifying origin energy burst out from his body. The azure light was extremely blazing. It was as if Qin Yi had become an azure sun at this moment. Green sky transforming dragon. With a shout, Qin Yi's hands formed into claws. Countless green lights reached their peak. Then, a giant green dragon nearly 10,000 feet long was born from the green lights. A terrifying dragon roar was heard. Then, the huge azure dragon looked down at Mu Qin's Marquis Mansion. Its cold dragon eyes were filled with ruthlessness. Qin Yi pressed his hands down. The giant green dragon swooped down. Its target was the house of Marquis Qin. Boom! A terrifying explosion resounded. After the green dragon entered the house of Marquis Qin, it twisted its huge body and began to destroy the surrounding buildings in the house of Marquis Qin. Every movement of the dragon could bring about terrible destruction. For a moment, miserable screams filled the Mu Qin Marquis Manor. Wherever the azure dragon passed, no matter if it was the pavilions or the cultivators or servants inside, they were all turned into powder under this power and disappeared completely. In an instant, the originally grand and majestic Mu Qin Marquis Manor was reduced to dust and debris under the destruction of the green dragon. Within the debris, there was even a small stream of blood that gathered into a small stream. This was the blood of the warriors and servants in the house of Marquis Qin. Basically, the people inside were not spared. Instantly, they transformed into a huge green dragon shadow around him. Bang! The blood-red light was extremely fast. In an instant, it stopped above the green dragon shadow. Only then did Qin Yen notice that the blood-red light was actually a strange blood-red spear. At this moment, the blood-red spear was actually rotating at high speed. Waves of dense blood energy were constantly dissipating. Who is it? Looking at the blood-red spear that stopped the green dragon shadow in front of him, Qin Yan's pupils shrank. He shouted in shock and anger. Unfortunately, he was answered with a long silence. It was as if the spear had suddenly appeared, pretending to be mysterious. Qin Yan roared coldly. He stomped his feet. Suddenly, the green dragon shadow gradually solidified. The originally illusory dragon shadow had now transformed into a real green dragon. One could see the green dragon scales that were shining with a cold light on its surface. Lord Qin Yen actually directly used the dragon soul materialization. Isn't this a little overkill? Looking at the materialized green dragon, Su Lingtian frowned slightly. He felt that Qin Yen was making a fuss over nothing. He had actually used the dragon soul materialization. Qin Yi shook his head and said, Lord Qin Yan's actions are likely because he is really angry. After all, he was interrupted halfway through his words. Naturally, he would feel uncomfortable in his heart. At this moment, he should want to completely crush the blood-red spear to vent his anger. In an extremely inconspicuous corner of the province, a sallow-faced middle-aged man looked at the dragon's soul materialization of Qin Yen. His eyes flickered as he softly said, "It seems that Qin Yen has advanced to the Xuanzuan realm after this period of cultivation. Unfortunately, so what if the dragon soul materialization is real? The gap between Qin Yen and me is getting bigger and bigger." As he spoke, he stomped his feet. Immediately, the blood-red spear that was pressing against the green dragon in the sky suddenly hummed. Countless amounts of blood energy condensed around it. The materialized green dragon was directly shattered under the increased power of the blood-red spear. Under Qin Yan's stunned gaze, the spear pierced through his collarbone. Swoosh! Under the powerful force of the blood-red spear, Qin Yan's entire body was blasted flying, and he was directly nailed to the origin energy tower by the blood-red spear. At this moment, many cultivators in the province looked at Qin Yen, who was originally in high spirits and threatening them, but after he finished speaking, he was actually directly pierced through by a blood-red spear that came out of nowhere and nailed to the origin energy tower. As they looked at Qin Yen, who was in an extremely sorry state at this moment and recalled his complacent expression from before, many people revealed a trace of schadenfreude in their eyes. It was even to the extent that Gulan Haohai, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji recovered from their initial shock. An indistinct smile hung on their faces, and the ridicule within it was rather dense. After spitting out a mouthful of blood, Qin Yan's expression was slightly dispirited. As for the changes in the expressions of the others, he naturally noticed all of them. Rage attacked his heart, and he spat out another mouthful of blood as he shouted furiously, "Who exactly is it?" The place where the blood-red spear pierced was very accurate. It actually just happened to pierce through his collarbone, thus sealing the meridians around his collarbone, causing him to be unable to use the slightest bit of yuan power. Didn't you very arrogantly say that we, the cultivators of the province, should know when to submit to the circumstances? If I remember correctly, these words should be exclusive to the victors, but look at you being nailed to the origin energy tower like a stray dog. Don't you feel that your words from before are very laughable? A mocking laugh slowly rang out from an inconspicuous corner of the province. After that, a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion slowly walked out with the corners of his mouth raised. This middle-aged man was Zhuan, who had used the 100 transformation technique to change his appearance and aura. When Qin Ye was crippled, Nguyen had actually already rushed to the province. Unfortunately, what caused his gaze to darken was that the members of the Zhou family had actually been taken out by Qin Ye and Xianyuan Li and taken the initiative to hand them over to Qin Yen. This action caused Zhuowen's heart to be filled with anger. Therefore, when Qin Yen crippled Qin Ye and Xianyuan Li, he did not appear. For two selfish fellows like Qin Ye and Xianyuan Li, Nguyen was too lazy to save them. At that time, the master of the meteorite's attitude of not wanting to cause trouble was also seen by Jun. Therefore, Nguyen also looked on coldly from the sidelines when the master of the meteorite met with misfortune. Since the other party had sold out his family, then what obligation did he, Zhuowen, have to save such a person? Nguyen was not that cheap. Zhuowen's appearance immediately attracted the attention of Grand Haohai and the others in the sky. A trace of astonishment appeared in their eyes. Although Qin Yen was only at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm, he possessed a third-grade dragon soul. If his dragon soul was materialized, his strength would be much stronger than an ordinary Xuanzuan realm cultivator. He was comparable to an advanced stage Xuanzuan realm cultivator. However, Qin Yen was unable to resist that casual spear and was pierced through by the blood spear. Clearly, The strength of this middle-aged man who had suddenly appeared was not simple. He was probably at least at the sovereign stage. Grand Hao Hai's eyes flickered. He suddenly leapt to the sky above Zhuan and looked down at Zhuan. He smiled and said, "Your strength is not bad. It's a waste of your talent to devote yourself to this small Muqin county. If you're willing to become a guest elder of my grand family is willing to nurture you. Of course, even if Qing Yan is unhappy with you, my grand family can help you take care of this matter. What do you think?" As he spoke, Grand Hao Hai looked down at Zhuan with a smile. That blood spear was extremely stunning. Grand Hao Hai could tell that this middle-aged man before him was not simple. Therefore, he took the risk of going against Qing Yan and wanted to recruit this middle-aged man before him. At this moment, Qing Yan had already escaped from the blood spear with the help of Qing Yi and Su Ling Tian. His gaze was fixed on Zhuan as he coldly said, "Patriarch Grand, recruiting this bastard means that you're going against my Blue Dragon Hall." Grand Hao Hai narrowed his eyes and said with a faint smile, "Your Excellency Qing Yan, I think you're twisting words and forcing logic. You can't represent the Blue Dragon Hall. Who I recruit has nothing to do with you, right?" Qing Yan coldly snorted and said, "My Blue Dragon Hall must take this person's life. What's the use of your grand family recruiting him? He'll still die in the end." Hearing this, Grand Hao Hai looked down at Zhuan and said indifferently, "You heard it too. Now that you've offended the Blue Dragon Hall, if you don't have a backer, you'll definitely die. Joining my grand family is the best choice." Zhuan slowly raised his head and quietly stared at Grand Hao Hai. However, he felt that it was somewhat ridiculous. This Grand Hao Hai had framed him many times. Now that he had changed his appearance, this person actually came to recruit him. If Grand Hao Hai knew that the middle-aged man before him was Zhuan, who knew what Grand Hao Hai would think? Seeing that Zhuan did not reply for a long time, Grand Hao Hai frowned and said, "What? Do you think my grand family is not good? If you don't join my grand family, not only will you be hunted down by the Blue Dragon Hall, you'll also be hunted down by my grand family." When Grand Hao Hai said this, Zhuan narrowed his eyes. This Grand Hao Hai actually intended to threaten him. "I'm not interested in your grand family." Scram. After saying that, not only was Grand Hao Hai stunned, the others were also stunned. Grand Hao Hai was the grand family's clan head, one of the 5 great families. At this moment he personally came to invite him. Not only was he flatly rejected by this person, he was even asked to scram. "What did you say just now? You dare to speak to me like this?" Grand Hao Hai asked again, somewhat unable to recover from his shock. "Why wouldn't I dare? I asked you to scram, why aren't you scramming?" Chapter 8:35. Tai Chi 8 trigrams I, You're courting death. The veins on Grand Hao Hai's forehead bulged. He was the patriarch of the grand family, yet he was told to get lost by a single person. It was a great humiliation. Boom! A terrifying aura burst out. Grand Hao Hai's long hair fluttered in the wind as he stared coldly at Tun. He said word by word, "I tried to persuade you to join the grand family, but you were unruly and even insulted me. Today, I'll let you know that there are some people you can't afford to offend." After saying that, Grand Hao Hai stomped his foot and a pair of black and white eyes appeared in the void behind him. The black and white eyes rotated together, forming the Tai Chi 8 trigrams. It looked extremely strange. Tai Chi 8 trigrams I. Grand Hao Hai has even released his armor soul. It seems like he really wants to take down this reckless middle-aged man. Qing Yan stared at the Tai Chi 8 trigrams I above Grand Hao Hai with a cold smile. Zhuan stared indifferently at Grand Hao Hai and the Tai Chi 8 trigrams I behind him. With a wave of his right hand, an extremely broken jade cauldron appeared in his hand. An extremely clear dragon's roar came from the jade cauldron. Then, streams of intertwining dragons might appeared in the air, surrounding Grand Hao Hai and the Tai Chi 8 trigrams I. 81 streams of dragons might had appeared. During the 3 years in the Azure Dragon Hall, Zhuan had not only comprehended the power of the Azura Blood Spear, but the Supreme Dragon Cauldron had also been refining the 81 strands of dragon power within it at all times. Now that 3 years had passed, the 81 streams of dragon's might had been completely refined by the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. Moreover, due to the nourishment of the Supreme Dragon Cauldron's dragon chi, the dragon's might was much stronger than before. Grand Haohai's pupils shrank as he looked at the intertwining dragon's might. His expression was extremely solemn as he could feel a trace of threat from the dragon's might. Tai Chi 8 trigrams, 6 directions and 8 desolations. Grand Haohai roared angrily. The black and white eyes behind him rotated rapidly. Streams of yin and yang energy gushed out from the eyes, turning into 2 black and white energy pillars that rushed towards the surrounding dragon's might. Rumble! However, to Grand Haohai's horror, the barrier formed by the surrounding draconic power was extremely tough. His Tai Chi 8 trigrams I could not cause any damage to it. Didn't you say you were going to kill me? Why aren't you coming to kill me now? Juan calmly stared at Grand Haohai, who was surrounded by the dragon's might, and asked indifferently. Hearing this, Grand Haohai's eyes flickered, but he did not answer. Instead, he continuously used the Taiji 8 trigram's eye to attack the surrounding dragon might. However, he felt a little regretful. If he had known that the middle-aged man in front of him had such a strong trump card, he wouldn't have taken the initiative to be the scapegoat. I'll deal with you later, you trash. After Zhuan said something that made Grand Haohai vomit blood, he took a step forward and rushed towards Qin Yan. After all, the members of the Zhua family were still in the hands of the Blue Dragon Hall martial artists. When he saw Zhuan rushing towards him, Qin Yi's eyes darkened, and he ordered Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian, "You two go. If there's a chance, capture him alive. If there's no chance, just kill him." Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian responded and rushed toward Zhuan with fierce eyes. Just now, Yuan had used 81 rays of dragon's might, which had indeed shocked the two of them. Unfortunately, Yuan had already used such a powerful method on Grand Haohai. At this moment, he definitely did not have any extra trump cards. Moreover, Zhuan's cultivation was only at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm, which was obvious to the two of them. With such a cultivation, Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian were not afraid at all. The two of them combined were enough to take down the middle-aged man in front of them. Zhuan waved his right hand, and the blood spear that was stuck in the Vitality Pagoda buzzed and was caught in his hand. Then, he suddenly swung his right hand, and a monstrous sea of blood swept towards Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian. Azure Sky Transforming Dragon. Centurion Hurricane. Qin Yi and Su Ling Tian both bellowed out furiously. They used the moves they were most familiar with. They could sense the terror of the sea of blood before them. The sea of blood contained an extremely profound power. 1,000 feet long azure dragon shadow appeared in the void behind Qin Yi, and behind Su Ling Tian were hundreds of hurricanes that were constantly rotating. They were both extremely terrifying. Rumble! The sea of blood instantly collided with the azure dragon shadow and the hundreds of hurricanes. A terrifying explosion slowly rose in the void, and like a chain reaction, the entire sky of the prefecture capital was filled with monstrous explosions. The terrifying explosive energy seemed as if it was going to explode the entire sky. It actually tore the sky into countless huge black holes, which looked exceptionally terrifying. What terrifying energy! Who exactly is this middle-aged man? Is he also someone from our prefecture capital? Why haven't I heard of him before? One of the two experts from the Blue Dragon Hall is at the Sovereign Realm, and the other is at the Golden Venerate Realm. The two of them are actually in a deadlock with this man in midair. How terrifying! The terrifying collision in the sky above the prefecture capital left all the warriors in the prefecture capital dumbfounded. They were all trying to guess the identity of the middle-aged man with a sallow complexion. Lv Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian were also silently watching the battle above. The shock on their faces was no less than the others. Who is that middle-aged man? Judging from his appearance, it seems like he wants to save the Zhua family. Luo Xing silently watched the battle above and muttered. Lv Tao shook his head and did not reply. He also had a trace of doubt in his heart. The middle-aged man's intention was too obvious. He was going to save the Zhua family. Sacrifice for a noble cause, a Jura transformation. Zhuan roared angrily. An even more terrifying sea of blood gathered from the void and enveloped Chun. Drip, drip. The sound of blood dripping slowly came from the sea of blood. A bloody figure suddenly walked out from the sea of blood. At this moment, Zhuowen's entire body was covered with an extremely strange blood-red armor. A blood-red skull mask had also appeared on his face. At this moment, Zhuowen looked like an Asura who had walked out from a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. He carried an endless amount of blood and resentment. Kill! After walking out from the sea of blood, Zhuowen stomped his foot. Boundless killing intent swept out and soared into the sky. The sea of blood, the green dragon shadow, and the 100 hurricanes that were originally in a deadlock suddenly tilted. The sea of blood actually covered the green dragon shadow and the 100 hurricanes in an instant. What? This person is clearly at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. How can he erupt with such terrifying power? Looking at the extremely terrifying sea of blood, Qin Yi and Su Lingtian's faces changed drastically. A trace of disbelief surfaced on their faces. Let's work together and suppress this person together. Qin Yi roared at Su Lingtian. The green glow on his body became more vigorous. The green dragon that was formed by his Yuan power roared and faintly grew a little stronger. Su Lingtian was not to be outdone. Terrifying Yuan power poured out. The 100 hurricanes that were originally behind him trembled a few times and grew from 100 to 150 hurricanes. The power was more terrifying than before by more than 30%. Yuan wore a blood-red skull mask. His exposed eyes were scarlet red. Those were a pair of eyes that only had killing intent. It was a pair of eyes that made people tremble. Kill, kill, kill. Azura blood sea, slaughter everything. Looking up to the sky, Zhuowen's aura became even more terrifying. He suddenly jumped up and raised the blood-red spear above his head. He fiercely slammed it down, directly hitting the green dragon and the 100 hurricanes. Crack! The green dragon roared. The corner of its mouth crumbled inch by inch under the powerful attack of the spear. Following that, the 100 hurricanes collapsed under the terrifying power. Boom! As soon as the azure dragon and the 100 hurricanes were destroyed, Zhuowen violently landed on the ground. The powerful force had actually blasted a hole several dozen meters in diameter into the ground. Zhuowen half-squatted in the center of the hole as a terrifying bloody aura emanated from him. Qin Yi and Su Lingtian both retreated. They stared at the half-squatting blood-red figure in the deep hole. Their eyes were full of seriousness. Qin Yan was also shocked. The middle-aged man in front of him was clearly at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. However, the strength he displayed was actually able to resist the combined forces of Qin Yi and Su Lingtian. He didn't know why, but when Qin Yan looked at the middle-aged man holding the spear, his mind would always think of the tall and straight figure of a young man. That person had given him extremely painful nightmares, and he also used a spear. This person is middle-aged. How could he be Zhuowen? I'm thinking too much. Qin Yan shook his head and muttered to himself. Slowly getting up, Zhuowen stood in the deep hole and coldly stared at Qin Yi and Su Lingtian. Kill! With a loud roar, Zhuowen suddenly collapsed the ground. The ground within 1,000 miles shook as if there was a violent earthquake. Then, Zhuowen was like a nimble monkey as he rushed towards Qin Yi and Su Lingtian. Stop him! Qin Yi shouted angrily. Green light covered his body as he fearlessly rushed toward Zhuowen. Su Lingtian's eyes flashed as he deliberately fell behind and followed behind Qin Yi. His right hand formed a claw. Green light flashed as it turned into a huge dragon claw. Qin Yi suddenly swung it at Zhuowen with a cold and sinister expression. Zhuowen's aura was like a rainbow. Under the endless sea of blood, he swung the blood spear. The tip of the spear fiercely pressed against Qin Yi's dragon claw. Then, the two figures seemed to freeze in the air. Break for me! With a twist of his right hand, the blood spear fiercely rotated. The dragon claw formed by Qin Yi's right hand was directly shattered. Then, the blood spear pierced through Qin Yi's right palm and came out of his shoulder blade. Ah! Qin Yi let out a shrill cry. His empty left hand grabbed onto the blood spear fearlessly and refused to let go. He shouted, Qin Wu, what are you waiting for? Quickly kill this person. Just as Qin Yi spoke, Su Ling Tian had already turned into a blur and quickly arrived behind Zhuan. His single arm that didn't seem like a human hand was extremely sharp, and it was aimed at Zhuowen's back. He was actually planning to do the same thing he did to Zhuowen last time and dig out his heart. The corner of Zhuowen's mouth was filled with a cold smile as he bellowed, "Come out, divine sun furnace." Chapter 8:36. The Death of Qin Yending. Su Lingtian's right hand suddenly struck the divine sun cauldron. A crisp and pleasant sound rang out, causing Su Lingtian to be stunned. He did not expect the man in front of him to have such a terrifying cauldron. "Burn!" Zhuan shouted softly. Immediately, the sun runes on the surface of the divine sun cauldron became dazzling. Then, endless sun fire enveloped Su Lingtian like a sea of fire that filled the sky. Chi. Su Lingtian's expression changed slightly. He clasped his hands together and terrifying origin energy poured out, forming a layer of origin energy shield on the surface of his body. He wanted to block the terrifying sun fire. Unfortunately, the temperature of the fire of sun was too high. Moreover, it was endless and unending. That kind of terrifying flame of extreme yang was actually about to completely melt his origin power shield. "Damn it! Block it for me!" Su Lingtian roared. The yuan energy in his body poured out in a frenzy, trying to completely block the fire of the sun around him. Unfortunately, the yuan energy shield around Su Lingtian was like a cup of water in the face of the endless fire of the sun. Whoosh! Zhuan suddenly pulled out the blood spear, and a stream of blood spurted out. Qin Yi's right arm was directly torn off by the blood spear. Then, Zhuan did not even look at Qin Yi. Instead, he changed the direction of his spear and rushed towards Su Lingtian, who was inside the sunfire. Back then, Su Lingtian had taken advantage of Zhuowen's weakened state to launch a sneak attack. Su Lingtian had dug out Zhuowen's heart, causing Zhuowen to be on the verge of death. If it wasn't for the heart of the underworld in his body, Zhuowen would have perished. Therefore, Zhuowen's killing intent towards Su Lingtian was extremely strong. Su Lingtian had to die. Within the flames of the sun, Su Lingtian, who was bitterly holding on, naturally saw Zhuowen who was rushing over. His expression instantly became extremely unsightly. The surrounding sunfire had already exhausted him. If Zhuowen joined in, he might really die here. Therefore, the moment Zhuowen rushed over, Su Lingtian hurriedly shouted, "Brother, I have no intention of being your enemy. Can you let me go? Moreover, I was once a member of Muqing County, the founder of Marquis by Chuan's estate, Su Lingtian. We are from the same county, so on account of our relationship, please let me go. I promise I won't go against you again." Zhuowen's gaze was cold and emotionless. This Su Lingtian really had the face to say such words. Back then, he was despicable and shameless enough to sneak attack him. Today, he wanted to do the same thing as last time, sneak attacking him from behind. How could he let go of such a despicable person? "You won't go against me, but I'll go against you. So, it's better for you to die." With that, Yuan instantly passed by Su Lingtian, who was within the flames of the sun. The blood spear turned into a sharp blood-red light and pierced through Su Lingtian's neck, bringing with it a stream of blood. "When you first ambushed me, you were already a dead man in my heart. Today, you want to use the same move again. Do you think you'll succeed?" The moment they passed by each other, Zhuowen's voice entered Su Lingtian's ears like a thin thread, causing the latter's pupils to constrict. He wanted to open his mouth, but he discovered that Zhuowen had already cut his Adam's apple, making it impossible for him to make a sound. "You are Zhuowen? You actually didn't die." Su Lingtian screamed crazily in his heart, but he couldn't make a sound. He stared fixedly at Zhuowen. He couldn't imagine how Zhuowen, whose heart had been dug out by him, could still be alive. Zhuowen did not give Su Lingtian any chance to live. He fiercely swung the blood spear, and immediately, a large head soared into the sky, bringing with it a pillar of blood, and drifted away. At this point, Su Lingtian had completely fallen. At this moment, Qin Yi's left hand was tightly clutching his empty right arm as he retreated to Qin Yan's side. He stared at Zhuowen, who was stepping on the sea of blood with the divine sun furnace floating behind him, with extreme fear in his eyes. The middle-aged man in front of him was so strong that even when he and Su Ling Tian joined forces, they were still no match for him. Moreover, the number of trump cards the former had far exceeded Qing Yi and Qing Yan's expectations. First, he released 81 strands of dragon's might, and even Grand Haohai was trapped inside, unable to come out. Now, he even used the furnace with the sun runes, and the sun fire released from it was extremely terrifying. That furnace is a royal spirit treasure. Who is this person? How can he have such powerful strength and a spirit treasure? Qing Yan's pupils constricted, but a trace of fear had already risen in his heart. Lord Qing Yan, this person is too strong. We are no match for him. Why don't we run? Qing Yi's gaze focused on Qing Yan, his face pale. Zhuowen's terror had already made him afraid. He really didn't have the courage to face that sallow-faced middle-aged man again. Escape? Do you think you can escape? As soon as Qing Yi spoke, a cold voice came. Zhuon stepped on the sea of blood and arrived above the two of them. His cold eyes quietly looked down at Qing Yan and Qing Yi. We are from the Blue Dragon Hall. If you dare to kill us, the Blue Dragon Hall won't let you go. Moreover, we have no grievances, so there is no need to kill each other because of this. It's not worth it at all. Qing Yan pretended to be calm and shouted at Zhuowen, who was above him, with a cowardly expression. We have no grievances? I don't think so. I think it's better for you to die here. Zhuowen sneered. With a stomp of his foot, the sea of blood around him tumbled and swept toward Qing Yan and Qing Yi below. Form the 9 dragons formation. Qing Yan's eyes were gloomy as he shouted at the 50 martial artists of the Blue Dragon Hall not far away. Immediately, the 50 martial artists flew above Qing Yan without hesitation and stepped on the mysterious steps of the formation. Waves of terrifying and powerful origin force gushed out. A monstrous dragon roar resounded through the sky. The 50 martial artists of the Blue Dragon Hall stepped on the mysterious steps and formed many seals with their hands. Surging origin force poured out. Suddenly, the terrifying origin force poured out and turned into 9 dragon shadows that were close to 10,000 feet long. The 9 dragon shadows twisted their huge dragon bodies in the sky like swimming snakes. The dragon roars were endless. Boom! The sea of blood suddenly hit the 9 dragons formation and immediately caused the 9 dragon shadows to counterattack crazily. For a moment, there was a stalemate. Fortunately, we were cautious this time and brought out 50 Blue Dragon Hall experts. It's just enough to form the 9 dragons formation. With the 9 dragons formation, it will be difficult for this person to break it. Looking at the 9 dragons formation blocking the sea of blood, Qing Yan and Qing Yi both sighed lightly. Among them, Qing Yan's eyes revealed a trace of complacency. When they went to Muqing County, he was the one who suggested to bring out the 50 Blue Dragon Hall experts. Although there were no experts in Muqing County, the 3 big families of Grand and Vast and Sea could have a share of the profits. Originally, the 9 dragons formation was to prevent the 3 big families of Grand, Feng and Chao from joining forces. Now, the sudden appearance of this powerful middle-aged man came in handy. Standing outside the 9 dragons formation, the killing intent in Zhuowen's eyes became more intense. With a loud roar, a golden light flashed and evolved into 4 heads and 8 arms, holding 8 spears. 8 Azura blood spear aura, break. With a cold roar, an even more terrifying sea of blood swept out from the void. At this moment, a terrifying wave of blood gushed out from the sky and the power of the sea of blood increased by more than 8 times. Gotcha! The 9 dragons formation simply couldn't hold on for long. It was directly submerged by the boundless sea of blood, and the 50 Azure Dragon Hall experts within the 9 dragons formation all exploded into clouds of blood mist within the raging sea of blood. Ah! The blood-curdling screams were like the mournful cries of ghosts, resounding through the entire sky. It sounded extremely terrifying. The smile at the corner of Qing Yan's mouth froze. Looking at the 9 dragons formation that collapsed in an instant and Zhuon, who had evolved into 4 heads and 8 arms, his eyes were filled with disbelief. The 9 dragons formation was broken? This person can evolve into 4 heads and 8 arms. Why is it the same secret skill as Zhuan? Qin Yan was stunned and muttered to himself. Master Qin Yan. Danger, retreat. Seeing Qin Yan standing there in a daze, Qin yelled and pulled Qin Yan back. Then he quickly retreated. Boom. Just as the two of them retreated, the blood shadow suddenly fell to the ground where they were standing, creating a huge crater. Dust filled the air, and an azure-like blood shadow slowly walked out, staring at Qin Yan and Qin Yi with its blood-red eyes. You are Zhuowen? Qin Yan stared at the middle-aged man in front of him and suddenly asked. Zhuowen didn't answer. He stomped his foot and instantly rushed toward Qin Yan. The blood spear in his hand was like a rainbow, erupting with extremely bright blood light. Azure Sky Transforming Dragon. Qin Yi shouted angrily and used Azure Sky Transforming Dragon again. A huge azure dragon phantom appeared, wanting to block Zhuowen. Unfortunately, Zhuowen had only used a single spear strike, and the enormous azure dragon phantom was instantly broken. Then, with the second spear strike, Qin Yi didn't even make a sound before his entire body exploded into a bloody mist. A figure came out of the blood mist and came in front of Qin Yan. Qin Yan wanted to resist, but unfortunately, the difference in strength between the two was too great. In an instant, he was lifted by Zhuowen like a chicken in his hand. Qin Yan stared at Zhuowen and said in a deep voice, "Are you Zhuowen? I can't think of anyone else who can use this secret skill other than Zhuowen. Anyway, you are about to die, so I don't need to hide anything from you. Yes, I am Zhuowen, so you should die in peace," Zhuowen said softly. His right hand suddenly exerted force, and Qin Yan's neck was strangely bent. His whole body went limp in Zhuowen's hand. He couldn't be more dead. Even though he was dead, Qin Yan still stared at Zhuowen. His eyes contained too many emotions. There was shock, regret, and disbelief. Perhaps even until his death, he could not imagine how Zhuowen had managed to survive. After all, he saw with his own eyes that Zhuowen's heart was dug out by Su Lingtian. Zhuowen and Qin Yan's conversation wasn't loud, so the others didn't know the specific content of their conversation. Chapter 8:37. Revealing his true appearance, the gazes of many people below constricted when they saw the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall being completely annihilated, and they revealed a wisp of shock. There were numerous experts in the Blue Dragon Hall, especially Qin Yi and Su Lingtian, who were experts amongst the 4 exalted level experts, yet they were still annihilated by this middle-aged man that appeared abruptly. This middle-aged man that appeared abruptly before them was actually so terrifying that all the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall were actually annihilated by him. In the sky 50 kilometers away, Feng Tian and Chao Ji stared with wide eyes as they saw the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall being completely annihilated. The forces dispatched by the Blue Dragon Hall this time were much stronger than their 2 clans. But such a formidable force was actually uprooted by the middle-aged man before them just like that. Moreover, even Grand Haohai was trapped by this person's dragon pressure. For a time, the two of them became slightly lacking in confidence, and they were even slightly afraid. "Your Excellency, the two of us are the patriarchs of the Feng clan and Chao clan of the 5 great clans of the imperial capital. The two of us don't want to be enemies with you, so we'll take our leave now." Chao Ji and Feng Tian cupped their hands toward Zhuowen in a rather courteous manner, and they intended to leave with the cultivators they brought along. "Did I allow the two of you to leave?" Zhuowen's gaze turned slightly, and his ghastly gaze stared straight at Chao Ji and Feng Tian. His cold and indifferent words caused Chao Ji and Feng Tian's bodies to stiffen slightly, and then they turned around and stared at Zhuowen as they said, "Then what do you mean?" "I asked the two of you to stay," Zhuowen continued, and his voice became extremely icy cold. Chao Ji and Feng Tian's expressions became extremely gloomy when they heard this, and they said to Zhuowen, "Your Excellency, even though your strength is extremely strong, it isn't so easy to make us stay. I advise you not to make more enemies for no reason. Looks like the two of you are very confident. As far as I'm concerned, the two of you aren't enemies, but dead people." As he spoke, Zhuowen didn't waste his breath any longer. He stomped his foot and transformed into a blood-red shadow that flashed swiftly towards Chao Ji and Feng Tian. Bitao's fury slap. Sword of flame devour. Feng Tian and Chao Ji both roared furiously. Soon after, they used their best moves. Immediately, monstrous waves surged over and surged towards Zhuo Wen. Behind the terrifying wave, a huge flaming sword that was hundreds of feet long soared into the sky. Following closely behind the huge wave, its aura completely locked onto Zhuo. Zhuo Wen's face was expressionless. He waved his 8 arms and an endless sea of blood swept out. The monstrous waves and the huge flaming sword were instantly shattered by the sea of blood. Die! With a flash of blood, Yuan arrived before Chao Ji and Feng Tian. In the end, he heavily smashed down. A terrifying power erupted, and the surrounding space completely shattered like glass. Chao Ji and Feng Tian were as insignificant as ants under this terrifying power. They were unable to resist at all and were directly smashed into powder by the terrifying power. After killing Chao Ji and Feng Tian, Yuan didn't let go of the experts brought by the two families. He was like an Azura, moving in and out of the warriors of the two families, creating a monstrous massacre. Pitter patter patter. Corpses fell from the sky above the county capital like withered leaves, bringing with them a rain of blood. The warriors in the county capital below were all stunned. The 3 major forces, Blue Dragon Hall, Feng family, and Chao family, who had been insufferably arrogant just a moment ago, were slaughtered like dogs by the sickly middle-aged man in front of them. It should be known that the 3 major forces of the prefecture, Shen Yuanli, Jade Lady Star Quartz Master of the Meteorite, and Mark Yongxing, Qinya, were as insignificant as ants in front of these forces. But now, these extraordinary experts were being slaughtered by this middle-aged man in such an unscrupulous manner. They were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The impact of such a scene was extremely great. LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian were also stunned. This middle-aged man was too terrifying. The experts of the most powerful forces of the imperial capital were killed just like that. They were afraid that it would cause a great uproar in the imperial capital. The warriors brought by the Feng and Chao families were quickly slaughtered by Zhu. Then, his gaze quickly landed on the Glan family's team that was hiding far away. At this moment, the team was led by Glan Lily. At this moment, the Glan family's team was as silent as cicadas in winter. They didn't dare to approach Zhuo at all. Among them, Glan Lily's pretty face was pale and her beautiful eyes were filled with fear. The 3 major forces of the Blue Dragon Hall, the Feng family, and the Chao family had all been destroyed. Qing Yi, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji were all experts in the initial stage of the Golden Venerate stage. However, in front of this middle-aged man, they were as weak as paper. There was only one thought in Glan Lily's mind, and that was to run far away from this place. However, Glan Haohai was still trapped in the dragon's power. Glan Lily couldn't bear to abandon her father, so she stood in the distance and hesitated. A bloody shadow flashed past and Zhuan quietly appeared in the sky above the Glan family's team. He looked down at the terrified Glan family members. Glan Lily gritted her teeth and stood up. She said to Zhuan, "Senior, we're not here to be your enemy. If we knew that you were from the prefecture, we wouldn't have come to harass you. I hope that you can be magnanimous and spare the Glan family this time. Glan Lily sincerely begs you." Looking at Glan Lily, who had put down her pride and begged him for mercy, Yuan suddenly felt strange. Back then, Glan Lily was arrogant and conceited. She didn't even put Zhuo in her eyes. She didn't even put Zhuo in her eyes at all. However, the arrogant Glan Lily was now in front of him, respectfully and fearfully begging for mercy. It seemed that the principle of the impermanence of the world was quite applicable. "You're not my enemy?" Zhuo muttered. He stomped his foot and turned into a shadow. He passed by Glan Lily and pounced on the Glan family's ancient martial art practitioners behind Glan Lily. Ah! Screams filled the sky. Within 10 breaths, the Glan family's ancient martial art practitioners were basically all killed by Zhuo. The only one left was Glan Lily, who stood in a daze. Slowly turning around, Glan Lily stared blankly at the Glan family's ancient martial art practitioners who had turned into corpses behind her. Her delicate body trembled and she couldn't help but kneel down. Her beautiful eyes were filled with grief and indignation. These ancient martial art practitioners were the elites of the Glan family. They were the mainstay of the Glan family and the main force of the Glan family's prosperity. However, they were all slaughtered in an instant. Her Glan family's loss was unimaginable. But our Glan family's people didn't provoke you. Why did you kill them? Glan Lily was trembling with anger as she stared at Jun. Jun, on the other hand, smiled. His face slowly changed from that of a sallow middle-aged man to that of a delicate and handsome young man. He had recovered his original appearance. Now you know why, Jun said as he looked down at Glan Lily indifferently. She raised her head slightly and stared at the young man in front of her. Suddenly she was stunned. The grief and indignation in her beautiful eyes suddenly turned into shock and disbelief. Not only Glan Lily, even Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and Lv Tao below were stunned. The Zhuo family's members who were trapped in the Yuanli prison were also stunned. Zhuoan? It's actually Zhuoan. Lv Tao, Qing Lian, and the Zhuo family's members cried out in unison. Their voices were filled with surprise. Originally, Zhuoan didn't die. He had actually turned into an unfamiliar middle-aged man and came to the prefecture capital to help them. No one was more shocked than Glan Lily. She had seen with her own eyes when Jun was taken away by Emperor Qing and his heart had been dug out by Su Lingtian. It was a fatal injury, but Jun was now alive and well. It was unbelievable. Although she was extremely shocked, Glan Lily also knew that Jun was standing in front of her alive. Not only was he not dead, but his strength had also increased by leaps and bounds. His cultivation had reached the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. Furthermore, the combat strength that Zhuowen had displayed was simply too terrifying. Even the golden exalts, Qin Yi, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji had been slain by him. As for his father, Grand Haohai, he had been trapped within the dragon aura and was unable to escape. Unknowingly, the young man in front of her had grown from an inconspicuous warrior to the point where he could easily kill golden venerables. Compared to Zhuan in front of her, Glan Lily suddenly realized that Huangfu Wudao, whom she had admired in the past, had paled in comparison and was mediocre. The two of them probably couldn't be compared at all. With a stretch of his right hand, a blood-colored energy turned into a rope and trapped Glan Lily. Then, Jun came in front of the dragon power below. He tapped his forehead with his right hand and summoned the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. The 81 rays of dragon power were completely absorbed into the Jade Cauldron. Immediately after, an extremely miserable figure staggered out of the dragon power. His aura had become much weaker. This person was Glan Haohai, who had been trapped by the dragon power. At this moment, Glan Haohai's hair was messy and his aura was weak. The black and white eyes in the void behind him were dim and lifeless. It seemed that Glan Haohai wasn't having a good time in the dragon power. As soon as he was released, Glan Haohai retreated cautiously and looked at the two figures in front of him. Lily. He quickly noticed Glan Lily, who was bound by the red rope, and his eyes were filled with anger. However, when his gaze converged on the young man beside Glan Lily, he was stunned. The young man's appearance was too familiar to him. He wasn't anyone else but Zhuan, whom he had tried every possible means to kill. You're Zhuan? You're actually not dead? Glan Haohai's eyes widened as he spoke in disbelief. Zhuan glanced at Glan Haohai indifferently. With a wave of his right hand, he lifted the Yuan force prison that had trapped the Zhuo family members to his side. Then he struck the surface of the Yuan force prison with his right hand, causing the Yuan force prison to shatter immediately. The members of the Zhuo family who were trapped in the Yuan force prison also came out and gathered around Zhuan. At this moment, the members of the Zhuo family were looking at Zhuan with admiration and reverence. The older generation was still all right, especially the younger generation of the Zhuo family members. They were all staring at Zhuowen's back with blazing gazes. When they were in the Zhuo family, the younger generation of the Zhuo family had grown up listening to Zhuowen's deeds. Many of the younger generation even regarded Zhuowen as their goal and idol. Now that they saw Zhuowen appear, How could these younger generation who worshipped him not be excited? Chapter 8:38. Capture alive. Grandpa, first uncle, second uncle, are you all right? Zhuan looked around at the Zhuo family members behind him. His expression softened slightly as he asked Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuo Dingtian, and Zhuo Baitian. Zhuo Xiangding, Zhuo Dingtian, and Zhuo Baitian looked at Zhuan with gratification. They had witnessed how Zhuan had killed the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall, the Feng family, and the Chao family. Apart from being shocked by Zhuowen's strength, they also felt gratified. Zhuan was from the Zhuo family. The stronger Zhuan was, the prouder they would be as members of the Zhuo family. This was especially true for Zhuo Tian, Zhuo Mei, and Zhuo Xiang, who were of the same generation as Zhuan. At this moment, they were all staring at Zhuan with blazing eyes. It wasn't just the younger generation. Even those of the same generation were in awe and admiration of Zhuan. This was because Zhuowen's talent was too terrifying and his strength was too strong. Therefore, there was no jealousy in their hearts, only awe and admiration. It was like standing at the foot of a mountain and looking up at a towering mountain. You would feel the majesty of the mountain, and your heart would only be filled with awe. The gap between Zhuan and them was too big. To the younger generation of the Zhuo family, Zhuan was like an unreachable mountain that they could only look up to. We're fine. That green eye must be planning to capture our Blue Dragon Hall alive, and then hand us, the Ryuka descendants, over to the Blue Dragon Hall headquarters to get credit for it. Zhuo Xiangding shook his head, and a sharp look flashed in his eyes. Zhuo nodded. He had already scanned the Zhuo family members with his mind, and found that they were not injured at all. Therefore, the worry in his heart faded a lot. Zhuan, you can't let Grant Haohai off. It's impossible for your Ryuka bloodline to be known by the Blue Dragon Hall for no reason. It's very likely that Grant Haohai leaked the secret. Zhuo Xiangding suddenly whispered to Zhuan. Zhuo Xiangding's words did not surprise Zhuo Owen. He had already suspected that the informant was Grant Haohai. However, Zhuo Xiangding's next words made Zhuo Owen's pupils shrink. Furthermore, I suspect that your father's disappearance 20 years ago is very likely related to Grant Haohai. Because your father treated Grant Haohai as a good brother, he didn't hide his dragon soul from Grant Haohai. Zhuo Xiangding did not speak. Instead, he stared hatefully at Grant Haohai in front of him. Although Zhuo Xiangding did not finish his words, anyone could guess that Grant Haohai was the one who leaked the secret of his father's disappearance back then. Zhuowen's expression changed. He finally understood why Grant Haohai had immediately searched his sea of consciousness when he first came to the Zhuo family. Grant Haohai probably wanted to check if there was a dragon soul in his sea of consciousness like his father. Fortunately, Xiao He was in a deep sleep at that time and was not discovered by Grant Haohai. However, Su Lingtian's existence eventually revealed the fact that he had a dragon soul in his body. After all, back in the Baichuan Marquis mansion, Xiao He had materialized his armor soul in advance, allowing Su Lingtian to see that Zhuan had a dragon soul. Therefore, there was a series of incidents where the Blue Dragon Hall came to capture Zhuan. Furthermore, Emperor Qing's sudden arrival was probably related to Grant Haohai. Zhuan, aren't you going to release Lily? Grant Haohai stared at Zhuowen with an ugly expression from more than 10 meters away. He had been trapped in the dragon's aura and did not know what had happened outside. When the dragon's aura suddenly disappeared, he saw that Grant Lily was imprisoned by Zhuan. Naturally, he was shocked and angry. However, after calming down, Grant Haohai also noticed that the leaders and warriors of the Blue Dragon Hall, Feng family, and Chao family had all been annihilated. Even Grant Haohai could not help but be shocked. In addition, the 81 dragon's aura had been subdued by Zhuan. He knew that the terrifying middle-aged man was probably Zhuowen in disguise. The person who had annihilated the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall, Feng family, and Chao family was Zhuan. When did Zhuowen become so terrifying? Also, isn't he dead? Grant Haohai was a little flustered. No matter if it was Zhuowen who had suddenly appeared in front of him, or the experts from the Azure Dragon Hall, the Feng family, and the Chao family who had been destroyed, or his daughter, Grand Lily, who had been imprisoned by Zhuowen, all of them caused him to feel extremely vexed. You want me to release Grant Lily? Do you think you have the right to do so? Zhuowen suddenly sneered. Grant Haohai's gaze was gloomy as he said, "If you don't release her, aren't you courting death?" The sneer on Zhuowen's face deepened. Did Grant Haohai still think that he was the same powerless junior as before? That he would allow him to slander and suppress him? "It's not up to you whether I'm courting death or not." After saying that, Zhuowen stomped his foot and stopped talking nonsense. He knew that the only way to make Grant Haohai behave was to suppress him with force. "Little bastard! How dare you attack me? You're courting death!" Grant Haohai shouted angrily. Although he guessed that the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall were killed by Zhuowen, he still didn't believe it was true. He stubbornly believed that it was possible that some senior had helped Zhuowen. Tai Chi 8 trigrams, 6 directions and 8 desolations. Gu Haohai roared furiously. The black and white eyes in the void behind him rotated at high speed once again. Waves of terrifying power poured out in torrents, intending to crush Zhuowen to death. "Break for me!" The 8 spears in Zhuowen's hands blasted out together, displaying the Azura blood spear aura at the same time. A terrifying sea of blood cut through the void, forming a terrifying blood-red vortex, and directly bombarded the Tai Chi 8 trigram's eye. Gotcha! Unsurprisingly, the Tai Chi 8 trigram's eye collapsed like a piece of paper. Grant Haohai retreated continuously, blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth. His eyes were filled with horror. Zhuowen wasn't surprised at all. Grant Haohai was also an initial golden venerate. If he could kill Qin Yi, Feng Tian, and Chao Ji, Grant Haohai naturally wouldn't be his match. At the instant Grant Haohai retreated, Zhuowen made a move as well. He instantly arrived before Grant Haohai and pressed his right palm against Grant Haohai's chest, sealing all the acupoints on Grant Haohai's body with origin energy, causing Grant Haohai to be utterly unable to utilize origin energy in the slightest. "You dare to seal my cultivation?" With his cultivation sealed, Grant Haohai felt powerless and couldn't help but shout. Zhuowen couldn't be bothered with him. He kicked Grant Haohai's chest and lifted him in front of Zhuo Xiangding and the others. He then lifted his foot and stepped on Grant Haohai. He asked indifferently, "Is the disappearance of my father related to you?" Grant Haohai's face turned red. He was the dignified patriarch of the Grant family. Being stepped on by Zhuowen, he felt humiliated. He snorted coldly and said, "It has nothing to do with me." "It has nothing to do with you?" Zhuowen laughed. With a flick of the blood-red spear in his hand, Grant Haohai's right arm was cut off. Blood spurted out like a fountain. Grant Haohai groaned in pain but didn't scream. Instead, he endured the pain and stared coldly at Tun. "I'll ask you one more time. Is the disappearance of my father related to you?" Zhuowen continued to ask. Grant Haohai kept his mouth shut and didn't intend to speak. Zhuowen's eyes became extremely gloomy. He waved the blood-red spear and pointed the sharp tip at Grant Haohai's snow-white jade neck. He said indifferently, "If you don't want Grant Haohai to die, answer me honestly." Sure enough, Grant Haohai's eyes turned red. He said in a deep voice, "This has nothing to do with Lily. You're not allowed to touch her. Although it has nothing to do with her, it's a pity that she's your daughter and has tried to kill me time and time again. I won't be lenient." Zhuowen tightened his grip on the blood-red spear and a trace of blood appeared on Grant Haohai's neck. Grant Haohai's delicate body trembled. She knew very well that Zhuowen was a man of his words. If Grant Haohai really didn't answer, then she might be mercilessly obliterated by Zhuowen. Grant Haohai's eyes flickered, but he sighed. He seemed to have aged more than 10 years. He said indifferently, "I can tell you what happened back then, but you have to promise me that you must let me and Lily go." "Bullfox, do you think it's possible for me to let you go? Tell me what happened back then and I can promise to let Grant Haohai go. As for you, forget it." The corners of Zhuowen's mouth were filled with a cold smile. At that time, Grant Haohai was disrespectful and made things difficult for him on many occasions. Moreover, Grant Haohai had even thought of ways to kill Zhuowen. So, how could he let Grant Haohai off? Grant Haohai's eyes flickered. He knew that it would be difficult for Zhuowen to let him go. He sighed and said, "Okay. If you can let Lily go, then I'll tell you what happened back then." However, you have to let Lily leave the prefecture first. I'll tell you. After pondering for a moment, Yun said, okay. As he spoke, Juan released the shackles on Grant Hao-hai. As soon as the latter broke free, she immediately went to Grant Hao-hai's side. The corners of her eyes were filled with tears and her gaze was filled with reluctance. Lily, leave the prefecture and return to the Grant family. Your talent is much greater than mine. I believe that you'll be able to bring glory to the Grant family. At this point, Grant Hao-hai suddenly stared at Zhuowen and continued, apart from this, you can't do anything to the Grant family. If you don't agree, I'd rather die than tell you the truth about what happened back then. Zhuowen frowned. He thought about it for a while before nodding, okay. If you can tell me what happened back then and where my father is, I won't do anything to the Grant family. Grant Hao-hai no longer looked at Zhuowen. Instead, he whispered into Grant Hao-hai's ear for a while. Soon after, Grant Hao-hai left the prefecture with a sorrowful look on his face. After all, there was still the Grant family in the imperial city that she needed to return to take charge of. With Zhuowen's hatred towards Grant Hao-hai, it would be very difficult for him to return alive. Grant Hao-hai only returned to his senses after Grant Hao-hai had finally disappeared from his sight. He stared indifferently at Zhuowen and asked, what do you want to know about that year? Speak. Did you add fuel to the fire in my father's disappearance? Zhuowen asked indifferently. Chapter 839. The truth of the past. Zhuowen and the other members of the Zhuo family narrowed their eyes when they heard Grant Hao-hai's words. Their eyes were filled with anger. Zhuo family was extremely famous in the Zhuo family. He could be considered a monstrous genius revered by many members of the Zhuo family. However, Zhuo Xiaotian's disappearance in the royal capital 20 years ago had dealt a heavy blow to the Zhuo family. Zhuo Xiaotian had once treated Grant Hao-hai as his brother, but Grant Hao-hai had betrayed Zhuo Xiaotian. How could the Zhuo family not be furious? After all, Zhuo Xiaotian was a once-in-a-century peerless genius. His disappearance was a heavy loss to the Zhuo family. It really is you. Grant Hao-hai, Zhuo Xiaotian treated you well back then. Why did you do this? Zhuo Xiangding trembled with anger. His eyes were bloodshot as he stared at Grant Hao-hai. Zhuowen also stared coldly at Grant Hao-hai. This Grant Hao-hai was truly despicable. Not only had he framed his father, Zhuowen, but he had also harmed his son. Grant Hao-hai's eyes were blurred as if he was recalling something. He murmured, back then, Zhuo Xiaoan and I went to the royal capital together. We wanted to carve out a place for ourselves there. Zhuo Xiaotian's talent was higher than mine. His cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. He grew stronger and stronger while I was left further and further behind. However, Zhuo Xiaotian was truly loyal and always took care of me. Although my talent wasn't as great as Xiaotian's, at least I wasn't left too far behind. Although I cultivated diligently, the gap between Xiaotian's and my cultivation grew larger and larger. Gradually, I couldn't keep up with Xiaotian's pace. Moreover, Xiaolan was favored by the Azure Emperor and was given the title of Heavenly Dragon Marquis. With the resources of the royal family, he quickly broke through to the fourth sovereign stage and awakened the Dragon Soul. Of course, the Dragon Soul was Xiaotian's secret, so he didn't tell anyone after awakening it. Even I didn't know. At that time, I was only at the Ultimate Emperor stage. Although my relationship with Xiaotian was good, there was still a gap between us due to the huge gap. From then on, I began to feel jealous of Xiaolan, and the jealousy in my heart grew stronger and stronger. As you know, I later became the Grant family's patriarch. In order for the family to grow stronger, I moved the family to the imperial capital province. Although there is a gap between Xiaotian and me due to the difference in our cultivation, he still helped us, the Grant family, to move to the imperial capital county. After our Glan family made the arrangements, I asked Xiaotian if he wanted to move his Zhuo family over. After all, Xiaotian's status and strength were very high. However, he wasn't too enthusiastic about the migration of his family. Instead, he was rather secretive about it. Moreover, when he first entered the imperial capital with me, he didn't use the surname Zhuo. Instead, he changed it to Long Xiaotian's. Since then, Xiaotian's family's. Families Zhuo Xiaotian's family's name as that. Later on, I went to Xiaotian's residence as a guest. Unintentionally, I saw Xiaotian's dragon soul in his practice room. That's when my doubts were solved. No wonder Xiaotian was so secretive about the Zhuo family. He and the Zhuo family are Ryuka descendants. That's why he didn't want to move the family. After all, the Zhuo Ryuka's family's status isn't good in the eastern lands. If Blue Dragon Hall finds out, they'll definitely put you on the wanted list. At that time, Xiao Tian, who was in the training room, also discovered me. Although his expression was not very good, he was not too worried when he saw that it was me. After briefly explaining the matter of him possessing a dragon soul, he instructed me not to speak of this matter. Zhuo Xiangding replied coldly, "So, because of your jealousy, you told Blue Dragon Hall about this?" Grand Hao Hai nodded and didn't deny it. "Yes, I did tell Blue Dragon Hall about this." At that time, the Blue Dragon Hall master was the current Aoki. Back then, Blue Dragon Hall also mobilized a lot of people and brought many experts to capture Xiaotian. That battle was very tragic. Xiaotian's cultivation was already at the early stage of the Golden Venerable Realm at that time, and the dragon soul in his body was at the 7th grade. It's considered an extremely high-level dragon soul in Azure Dragon Hall. Xiaotian's dragon soul manifestation was no weaker than Aoki. At that time, Blue Dragon Hall suffered heavy casualties. Even Aoki couldn't do anything to Xiaotian. It was that day that Xiaotian's name shook the entire imperial capital. Later, Emperor Qing suddenly attacked and suppressed Xiaoan. Although Zhuo Xiaotian was very strong, he was still not a match for Emperor Qing, who was in the Emperor realm. After struggling for a while, Emperor Qing finally captured him. At this point, Grand Hao Hai suddenly laughed and said, "Maybe you guys don't know yet? That Emperor Qing's true identity is an outer court elder of the Azure Dragon Hall's main hall. Normally, even Qing Mu is courteous to him. There aren't many people in the Azure Mystic Empire who know this secret." Zhuan and the others were moved when they heard this. They never expected that the ruler of the Azure Mystic Empire, the Azure Emperor, was actually an outer court elder of the Azure Dragon main hall. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. In fact, when Emperor Qing wanted to strip him of his dragon soul, he suspected that Emperor Qing might have something to do with Zhuo Xiaotian's disappearance. Now, it seemed that it was true. "Is my father alive or dead now?" Zhuan asked again, looking slightly nervous. The members of Zhuo family also stared at Grand Hao Hai. They also wanted to know Zhuo Xiaotian's whereabouts. Grand Hao Hai's eyes flickered and he said indifferently, "Where is Zhuo Xiaoyan? Actually, I don't know either. After Emperor Qing captured Zhuo Xiaotian, he didn't say much and just disappeared from the royal capital. As for where he went, I don't know either." Hearing that, the members of the Zhuo family were disappointed. Zhuan frowned and continued to ask, "Back then, my grandfather said that before my father went missing, he brought me back to the family. Do you know who my mother is?" Zhuan stared at Grand Hao Hai closely. His subconscious was turbulent. Although the one who occupied this body was no longer the Zhuan of the past, the subconscious of this body still had an extremely strong desire for his father and mother. This strong emotion had always affected Zhuan. It made Zhuan very anxious to know the truth about his parents. After all, the bloodline that flowed through his body came from the parents of this body. The emotion of the bloodline was extremely stimulating to his soul. Zhuo Xiangding and the others also focused their gazes on Grand Hao Hai. They also didn't know the whereabouts and identity of Zhuowen's mother. At this moment, they were also extremely curious. However, Grand Hao Hai's expression suddenly changed. His eyes flickered and he said in a low voice, "Your mother's identity is very mysterious. I also don't know her origin. If you want to know, you can only ask Zhuo Xiaotian." Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes flashed with disappointment. Soon after, he recovered his calmness. With a wave of his right hand, he immediately released the shackles on Grand Hao Hai and said indifferently, "You're the head of the Grand family. I'll give you a glorious death. Kill yourself." Grand Hao Hai's pupils shrank. Zhuowen actually wanted him to kill himself. However, when he thought of Zhuowen's strength, he revealed a bitter smile. "Ha! Perhaps this is retribution. 20 years ago, I murdered my best brother Zhuo Xiaotian because of jealousy. 20 years later, I murdered Zhuo Xiaotian's son because of a marriage contract. I reaped what I sowed. Dun. I hope you can remember your promise. Glancing deeply at Zhuowen one last time, Grant Haohai raised both his hands and slammed them onto his forehead. His body suddenly stiffened, and soon after, he softly fell to the ground without making a sound. Zhuowen was expressionless as he looked at Grant Haohai, who had committed suicide. Back then, when Grant Haohai had tried every possible means to kill Zhuowen, he should have known that this day would come. Zhuo Xiangding and the others also looked at the dead Grant Haohai with sighs. Dun. It's really... I didn't expect you to still be alive. LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian also came from nearby. When the three of them saw Zhuan in front of the Zhuo family, their faces were filled with joy. Zhuan nodded and revealed a smile. LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian really treated Zhuan with sincerity. Zhuan had seen their actions at that time. Now, what will you and the Zhuo family do? The Blue Dragon Hall already knows about your Ryuka bloodline identity. In addition, you killed Qin Yen and the others today. I'm afraid that Aoki will be furious. He will probably inform the Blue Dragon Hall. LV Tao suddenly said worriedly. Zhuan nodded. LV Tao was right. When the news here spread to the provincial capital, Emperor Qing, Aoki, and the other higher-ups would probably cause a commotion. Zhuan cultivated the 100 transformation technique, so he was not afraid of being wanted by the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing. He was mainly worried about the Zhuo family, LV Tao, and the others. When the time came, it would be difficult for them to escape from the Blue Dragon Hall. I have a place that I can guarantee is extremely secretive. However, once you enter, I'm afraid that you won't be able to come out alive. So, are you willing to follow me into that place? After hesitating for a moment, Zhuan looked around at LV Tao and the Zhuo family and asked cautiously. Zhuan, our Zhuo family will listen to you. Zhuo Xiangding said with a smile. The people behind him naturally did not have any objections. LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian looked at each other and nodded. They said, we will also listen to you. Hearing this, Yuan was quite moved. How could he not be moved when these people trusted him so much? Taking a deep breath, he took out a white jade tablet from his spirit ring. The word, Tsang, was written on the jade tablet. It was the Tsang Dragon token he had obtained from the Tsang Dragon Hall. There was a mini-universe formation hidden in the Tsang Dragon token. Zhuowen, who was in the outside world, could use the token to teleport himself back to the Tsang Dragon Hall. Chapter 840. Re-entering Baiyang Town, Zhuowen formed a seal with both hands, and surging origin energy surged into the Azure Dragon token. Immediately, a white light erupted from the token, and the small universe formation within it was completely activated by Zhuowen. The white light became even more intense, and in the end, it enveloped Zhuowen, the surrounding Zhuo family members, LV Tao, and the others. Then, everyone disappeared without a trace in the white light. This was an empty hall. The ground was filled with strong clouds and mist, and the top of the hall was an oval-shaped dome filled with stars. If one did not look carefully, they might think that it was a real starry sky. This was the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall. After Zhuowen passed the first heaven and earth test, he had the qualifications to enter the hall with the Azure Dragon token. At this moment, LV Tao, Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and the members of the Zhuo family were all looking around the hall in confusion. Their eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Where is this place? The origin energy inside is so dense. Moreover, I can also feel that within the dense origin energy, there is an extremely strange and intense energy that is nourishing my meridians. LV Tao's eyes revealed a strange expression. After feeling the surging origin energy, he could not help but exclaim. The expressions on the faces of the others were similar to LV Tao's. Then, their gazes all gathered on Zhuowen. The one who brought them here was Zhuowen, and they knew that Zhuowen definitely knew the reason. Seeing the gazes of the crowd, Zhuowen no longer hid anything. He briefly explained the matter of the dragon vein. At the same time, He also gave a brief introduction of the Azure Dragon Hall. As Zhuan explained, Zhuo Xiangding, LV Tao, and the others became more and more shocked. They finally knew why Zhuowen had advanced so quickly. It turned out that the Dragon Vein was a blessing in disguise. You said that the master of the Azure Dragon Hall is a saint? And the Azure Dragon Hall itself is a Holy Spirit treasure? Zhuo Xiangding was still in disbelief and could not help but ask. Zhuan nodded and said, "The master of the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Taoist, is indeed a saint, and an extremely terrifying one at that. Although I have the Azure Dragon token, I only have 3 chances to enter and exit the Azure Dragon Hall. Now that I have used one, there are only 2 chances left. The Azure Dragon Hall contains the source of the Azure Dragon, and the origin energy is much denser than the outside world. It is extremely beneficial for cultivation. Furthermore, this Azure Dragon Palace is also very secretive. You guys are also very safe here." At that time, the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Hall, at that time of the Azure Dragon Hall. At the Azure Dragon Hall, Zhuan Hall Hall, Zhuan Hall Hall Hall, Zhuan Hall, Zhuan. All of you stay in the Azure Dragon Palace first. I still need to make a trip to the outside world. Of Zhuing Lu, of Yi, of Emperor, and of the Emperor. Also, I must find out the whereabouts of my father." Zhuowen continued. Zhuo Xiangding walked up to Zhuowen, patted his shoulder, and said, "The imperial capital is in turmoil right now. Zhuowen, be careful." Zhuowen smiled and said, "Don't worry. Grandfather, I have the 100 transformation divine art and can change my appearance and aura. Even if the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing want to arrest me, I'm not afraid." After saying that, Zhuowen nodded to LV Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian. Then he took out the Azure Dragon token and turned into a white light, disappearing from the hall. Looking at the disappearing figure of Zhuowen, everyone in the hall had a hint of worry on their faces. Although they knew that the current Zhuowen was no longer the same as before, the power of the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing was too great. It was difficult for Zhuowen to do anything alone. If it was a head-on clash, Zhuowen would not be a match for the former. "Everyone, let's cultivate in the Azure Dragon Hall first. We are too weak. If we can increase our strength, it will be helpful to Zhuowen in the future." Zhuo Xiangding suddenly spoke, and everyone nodded in agreement. Although they were still worried in their hearts, it was more of a desire to become stronger. The reason why they were bullied by others was because they were too weak. If they were powerful, the Blue Dragon Hall would not dare to touch them. At the end of the day, it was because they were too weak. The vitality in the Azure Dragon Hall was very rich. Because of the origin of the Azure Dragon, it was much easier for them to cultivate here than in the outside world. Outside the imperial capital, a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion stood quietly on a rock. He looked at the imperial capital in front of him with a sharp gaze. "Emperor Qing and the Blue Dragon Hall are too strong. It's impossible for me to break into the imperial capital's dungeon alone. It seems that I need to see Elder Xun." Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He did not rush toward the imperial capital. Instead, he flew in the opposite direction. The direction he was heading was Baiyang Town, where the Arcane Guild was located. Baiyang Town was still the same as before. It was full of tranquility and peace. Arcanists in robes were constantly coming in and out of Baiyang Town. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He put on the Arcanist's robe and entered Baiyang Town naturally. Zhuowen walked along the bustling streets toward the Arcane Guild at the front. He soon arrived in front of the tower-like building. This building was the headquarters of the Arcane Guild. "Stop right there. Only 4th-grade Arcanists are qualified to enter the headquarters of the Arcane Guild. You're just a 3rd-grade Arcanist. Don't join in the fun." A lazy young man stood at the entrance of the headquarters. This young man was also a 3rd-grade Arcanist. He saw that Zhuowen's Arcanist's robe only had the 3rd-grade symbol drawn on it. There was a touch of disdain in his eyes, and he directly rejected Zhuowen at the door. Zhuowen's current appearance was that of a sickly middle-aged man, but he was only a 3rd-grade Arcanist. This young man naturally had a look of disdain on his face. His attitude was even a little arrogant. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He did not expect the headquarters of the Arcane Guild to have such a requirement. When he first entered, he was led in by Elder Xun. At that time, he was naturally unimpeded, so he did not know about this rule. I have something to discuss with Elder Xun. Please inform him. Although the attitude of the young man in front of him made Zhuowen unhappy, he did not want to cause trouble. Therefore, he could only let the young man go in and inform him. As long as Elder Xun came out, everything would be fine. You're looking for Elder Xun? The young man stared and looked Zhuowen up and down. However, he sneered and said, "Who do you think you are? Elder Xun is the founder of our arcane guild. He has a high status. How can a small fry like you meet him?" Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, "You just need to inform Elder Xun. Then, you'll know whether I'm qualified to meet him or not." The young man's eyes became even more disdainful. He made up his mind that the middle-aged man in front of him was probably here to cause trouble. Therefore, his tone became unfriendly. "Get lost. Elder Xun is not someone like you can meet." Zhuowen's face was slightly unpleasant. This young man guarding the door did not know what was good for him. He did not even let him inform him. "Then, can you inform the other elders?" Zhuowen's voice became a little cold. The young man's mocking smile became even more intense. He said, "I've said it before. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can meet the other elders? Get lost as soon as possible." Zhuowen, on the other hand, was so angry that he began to laugh. A frightening amount of consciousness energy surged out, and the smile on the young man's face froze. His eyes widened in shock. Wasn't this middle-aged man a rank 3 Arcana Master? Why was his mind power so terrifying? "Get lost. I have something to discuss with Elder Xun," Zhuowen shouted coldly. His mental power surged out of his body, forcing the youth to stumble backward. The youth fell on his butt in the guild hall. Meanwhile, Zhuowen had already stepped into the guild hall. The scene of the young man suddenly sitting on the ground and a strange middle-aged man barging into the hall was naturally seen by the other arcanists in the guild. Many of them even showed a hint of mockery when they saw the young man's sorry state. This young man was the 9th Elder's honorary disciple, and he was quite talented as well. He relied on the 9th Elder's name to strut around in the guild as a mere rank 3 Arcana Master, causing quite a few Arcana Masters to loathe him. Because of the 9th Elder, many grade 4 Arcanists with no background in the guild had to do things according to this young man's wishes. They were usually very aggrieved. Now that they saw the young man being humiliated, many Arcanists in the hall were secretly delighted. However, when these Arcanists saw that the person who barged in was only a grade 3 Arcanist, a strange expression appeared on their faces. It seemed that this middle-aged man who barged into the guild really did not know the rules at all. They were afraid that he would suffer a great loss. "How dare you barge into the guild? Men, take this person down and wait for the elder to deal with him." Looking at the mocking gazes from around him, the young man flew into a rage out of humiliation. His face turned green and white as he shouted in the hall. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A group of Arcanists in silver robes came into the hall and surrounded Jun. The middle-aged man in the lead glanced at the young man indifferently and immediately asked, "What happened?" The young man hurriedly came to the side of the middle-aged man in silver robes and pointed at Jun. "Chief Xing, this person barged into the guild and injured me without permission. He disregarded the rules of the Arcana Guild and ran amok." The middle-aged man nodded and stared at Jun. "You barged into the guild, what else do you have to say? If you surrender now, I can be lenient with you. You haven't asked me the specific reason, and you already believe this person's one-sided story?" Jun suddenly said, somewhat amused. From the conversation between the young man and the middle-aged man in silver robes, the two were probably quite familiar with each other. This silver-robed man was obviously helping this young man. "You still dare to talk back? A rebellious fellow like you, the life of a prisoner is more suitable for you. Men, take this person down directly." The middle-aged man in silver robes had a sinister look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, The silver-robed guards behind him immediately erupted with terrifying mind power and rushed toward Zhuan, wanting to completely capture Zhuan. Ignorant. Chapter 841. Seeing Elder Shun again looking at the group of silver-robed guards who were instantly repelled, many of the surrounding people were shocked. These silver-robed guards were the patrolling guards of the Arcane Guild. They were extremely strong, and basically all of them had a cultivation of level 4 lower spiritual power. Even so, they were repelled by the sickly middle-aged man in front of them in one move. This person was too terrifying. Moreover, judging from the strength displayed by this middle-aged man, he was probably not just a level 3 arcanist but at least a level 4 arcanist. The young man's pupils shrank. When the silver-robed guards were defeated in an instant, he knew that the middle-aged man in front of him had been hiding his cultivation. However, he was proud and arrogant and naturally would not give up just like that. You've got guts. How dare you hit people in the Arcane Guild? Chief Xing, this person is arrogant and lawless. We must take him down. The young man's words were righteous and impassioned, but he quickly took a step back and hid behind the silver-robed middle-aged man. The young man's little action was naturally noticed by the Chief Xing, but he did not care. Instead, he stared indifferently at Zhuan and said, "What else do you have to say? You hit our guards in the Arcane Guild. Don't even think about leaving. I don't want to have a conflict with you. I'm here to look for Elder Shiwan. As long as I call Elder Shiwan out, everything will be settled." Zhuan said lightly. "Nonsense. You're spouting nonsense. Elder Shiwan is not someone like you can meet. How dare you threaten to meet Elder Shiwan after hitting people from the Arcane Guild? I think you must have eaten a leopard's guts." The young man shouted again. Shaking his head, Zhuan did not want to make a fuss anymore. Instead, he took out the second elder's token and waved it at the silver-robed man. He said, "This is the second elder's token. My identity is the second elder of the Arcane Guild. Do you think I'm qualified to meet Elder Shiwan?" As soon as the token was taken out, the hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at the middle-aged man in front of them with shock in their eyes. They did not expect that the sickly middle-aged man in front of them was actually the second elder of the Arcane Guild, second only to Elder Shun. The original second elder was Elder Lu Li, but Elder Lu Li was later defeated by a young man. Since then, the young man had replaced Elder Lu Li as the second elder. However, the new second elder had not appeared for a long time and everyone gradually forgot that there was still a second elder in the Arcane Guild. Now that this sallow-faced middle-aged man had taken out the second elder's token, he was most likely the new second elder who hadn't shown himself for a long time. The silver-robed middle-aged man was also stunned. The surprise in his eyes was even denser than the others. "How dare you? How dare you pretend to be the second elder? I've heard from my master that the new second elder is a young man in his early 20s, but you're already middle-aged, so how can you be the second elder? Chief Xing, don't be fooled by him. The token in his hand is definitely fake." In the originally silent hall, the young man jumped out again and pointed at Zhuan with his right hand. His eyes were full of disbelief. After all, he was the unofficial disciple of the ninth elder and knew the characteristics of the mysterious second elder. The sallow middle-aged man in front of him could not be the second elder. "Oh, it's a fake?" The head guard narrowed his eyes. He had also heard that the second elder was a rather young man who was extremely powerful. Back then, even Elder Lu Li was no match for him. However, the sallow-faced middle-aged man before him did not seem to be the case. "How dare you pretend to be the second elder? You're courting death." Chief Xing's face was a little ugly. He snorted coldly and the mind power of a complete grade 4 surged out. He flew directly toward Zhuan, wanting to get rid of him completely. Zhuan's eyes became colder. Regardless of whether it was the young man or the Chief Xing, they were in cahoots. He had even taken out his identity token, but the two of them still wanted to deny it. Bang! Zhuan stomped his foot and a terrifying mind power poured out. Before the Chief Xing could even get close to Zhuan, he only felt a heavenly pressure crushing him. Then, his entire body flew in the opposite direction and landed heavily on the ground. I'm pretending? Do you think I still need to pretend? Zhuan came in front of the young man. His expression was cold and emotionless. His eyes were piercingly cold. Looking at the middle-aged man in front of him, the young man was so scared that he fell to the ground and complained in his heart. He did not expect the middle-aged man in front of him to have such powerful mind power. You'd better not mess around. This is the Arcane Art Guild and I'm the disciple of the Ninth Elder. If you mess around, you won't be able to walk out of the Arcane Art Guild. The young man trembled and actually dared to threaten him. Zhuan did not bother to talk nonsense with him. His right hand formed a sword finger and suddenly pointed at the young man's forehead. A scream was heard and the young man held his forehead with both hands and kept rolling on the ground. You actually destroyed my knowledge, see? How could you do this? The young man's shrill scream immediately moved many of the people present. Their eyes were filled with dread. The most important part of an arcanist was the knowledge C in the depths of the forehead. Its importance was equivalent to the dantian of a martial artist. If the knowledge C was destroyed, it meant that there was no place to store mind power. From then on, he would be a cripple. This is just a small punishment for you, Zhuan said coldly. There was a piercing sound and a gray-robed old man came out from the Arcane Art Guild. He came to the center of the hall and looked around at the silver-robed guards who were beaten to the ground and the screaming young man. His face became extremely ugly. It's the Ninth Elder. I didn't expect even the Ninth Elder to come out. This person beat up the silver-robed guards and crippled the Ninth Elder's registered disciple. I'm afraid the Ninth Elder will not let this person go. Everyone's eyes were focused on the Ninth Elder and Zhuan who had just appeared. You beat up the silver-robed guards and crippled Yuzha? The Ninth Elder shouted angrily at Zhuan. Zhuan shook his head and his face slowly changed from a middle-aged man to a young man. He said, Ninth Elder, I haven't seen you for a long time. Don't you recognize me? The Second Elder, Ton? I've heard about what happened in the imperial capital. So you're not dead. The Ninth Elder was startled at first and then said with some fear. The scene of Zhuan personally killing Master Yanhua and Elder Lu Li at the Arcane Art Guild Square was still vivid in the Ninth Elder's mind. The young man in front of him possessed strength that was much stronger than him, the Ninth Elder. Originally, I came here to look for Elder Shun, but your registered disciple, did not know what was good for him and insisted on blocking me outside. He didn't even want to inform me and planned to expel me. That's not all. Later on, I took out the Second Elder's identity token to show my identity, but he said that my token was fake. I had no choice but to cripple him. The Ninth Elder shouldn't blame me, right? Zhuan said politely with his hands cupped. Hearing this, the Ninth Elder's mouth twitched. He secretly scolded Yuzha's stupidity in his heart and laughed. Of course not. This rebellious disciple did not know etiquette and even slandered you, the Second Elder. He deserved to die. Now, you've only crippled his mind. That's letting him off easy. Since the Second Elder wants to look for Elder Shun, then follow me. I'll bring you to see him. With that, the Ninth Elder did not even look at Zhuan and politely led the way in front of him. Zhuan naturally followed behind him. After Zhuan and the Ninth Elder left, the rest of the arcanists in the hall were in an uproar. Their eyes were filled with shock. I didn't expect this person to be the Second Elder. Fortunately, I didn't join in the fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ended up any better than Yuzha. Yuzha reaped what he sowed. He relied on his identity as the Ninth Elder's disciple and was used to acting like a tyrant. Now that he has kicked a metal plate, he deserves it. The discussion around them grew louder and louder. Yuzha slowly stood up, his eyes filled with confusion. Now that his mind had been crippled, he was no longer destined to be an arcanist. He was just an ordinary person. Hearing the mockery around him, the confusion in Yuzha's eyes was finally replaced by regret. He did not expect that he, Yuzha, would end up like this because of his impulsiveness. It was really sad. Zhuan naturally did not care about Yuzha's situation. At that moment, he was following the Ninth Elder into the depths of the association. Soon, the two of them came to an ordinary iron door. The ninth elder knocked on the door and said, "Elder Shun, the second elder, Yun, has returned and wants to see you." The iron door opened automatically. Zhuan found that it was pitch black behind the iron door. It was actually a deep passageway. Elder Xuan is on the other side of the passageway. You can go in. After the ninth elder finished speaking, he quietly left the place. Zhuan stepped through the iron door and walked along the passageway unhurriedly. After a while, he came to a spacious room. The ceiling of the room was very high. There were countless black iron chains on top of it. There was a huge formation in the middle of the chains. Inside the formation was a world of ice and snow. The cold air was oppressive. It was the extreme mysterious formation that Elder Xuan had set up. Inside the extreme mysterious formation were the 9 types of earth fires that had gone out of control. At that moment, the 9 types of earth fires were much more obedient under the control of the extreme mysterious formation. They were no longer as wild and violent as before. In the middle of the room, an old figure sat quietly. One quietly stared at the figure and said softly, "Junior Zhuan greets Elder Shun." Elder Xuan opened his eyes and stared at Zhuan. He smiled and said, "You have done a lot of sensational things in the imperial capital. Even many people in Baiyang town know your name." Zhuan scratched his head and said with a wry smile, "Elder Shun, don't make fun of me. My cultivation is not enough. As for those big things, they are only relative to ordinary warriors." Chapter 842. S. request. Elder Xuan's words did not surprise Zhuan at all. With a glint in his eyes, Yun said, "Elder Shun, to be honest, my request this time is a little too much, so I hope you won't blame me for being rude." "It's all right. After all, you're also a member of the Arcane Guild. If you have any difficulties, just tell me. If I can do it, I won't refuse." Elder Xuan smiled faintly. Nodding, Yun briefly explained some of the things that happened in the Imperial City, and he did not hide the fact that he had a dragon soul. The Arcane Guild was spread throughout the Heavenly Armor continent, and its influence was not inferior to the Blue Dragon Hall. Therefore, Yun was not afraid to reveal the fact that he had a dragon soul. Of course, Zhuan did not say anything about the Azure Dragon Hall. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall was the inheritance of a sage. If such a thing was revealed, no matter how noble Elder Xuan was, it would inevitably arouse greed in his heart. The preciousness of the sage's inheritance would definitely cause a commotion in the entire Eastern land. At that time, it would cause countless forces in the Eastern land to covet it. Therefore, Zhuan could not reveal such an important secret. "Zhua Xiaoyu, I didn't expect you to be a Ryuka descendant with a dragon soul." Elder Xuan looked at Zhuan in astonishment, and his tone was full of surprise. "Not to mention the Azure Dragon Hall in the Imperial City, the Qing Emperor will not let you go. Because the Qing Emperor is the outer elder of the Azure Dragon Main Hall, and at the same time, he has an extremely rare contract scroll. He is more interested in a Ryuka descendant with a dragon soul than others." Elder Xuan's words caused Zhuan's pupils to shrink. This Elder Xuan really knew a lot. He even knew that the Qing Emperor was an outer elder of the Azure Dragon Main Hall. "My very good senior, Brother Han Tian from Muqing County, was captured by the Qing Emperor and imprisoned in the Imperial City dungeon because he saved me. I want to save Brother Han Tian, so I'm here to ask Elder Xuan for your help," Zhuan said rather sincerely. Locked up in the dungeon of the Imperial City? That was the most heavily guarded place in the Imperial City. "It's not that easy for you to save someone from inside," Elder Shi Yuan said with a serious look. Then nodded and said, "I know. That's why I came to ask Elder Xuan this time. I heard that you once fought with Emperor Qing. I know that with your strength, you can hold him back." Elder Xuan's eyes flickered as he sighed and said, "Emperor Qing is not as simple as you think. His strength is unfathomable. Although I had some conflicts with Emperor Qing back then, Emperor Qing did not use his full strength. I'm guessing that if Emperor Qing uses his full strength, even I won't be his match." "What? Is Emperor Qing so powerful?" Zhuan asked in surprise. "Strong. And it's very strong," Elder Xuan said with certainty. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He knew that since Elder Shi Yuan had said so, he was probably rejecting his request. Tuan cupped his hands and said, "Then I'll have to bother you, Elder Shi Yuan." With that, just as Zhuan was about to leave, Elder Shi Yuan's voice sounded, "Shuo Xiaoyu, don't be in a hurry to leave. There might be a way. If you can tell me the quality of your dragon soul, I can consider helping you." Turning around, Zhuan stared at Elder Shi Yuan and hesitated for a moment before saying, "Back then, Qing Yan used the dragon soul detector to check the quality of the dragon soul in my body, but in the end, the dragon soul detector shattered." Zhuan did not specifically report the quality of the dragon soul. In fact, even he did not know how high Xiao Hei's quality was. After all, this guy did not even put a 9th grade dragon soul in his eyes. It was really difficult for him to define. What? Even the dragon soul detector was shattered? It seems that the dragon soul in Zhuo Xiaoyou's body is very powerful. If that's the case, I'll help you once and follow you to the Imperial City dungeon. Elder Shi Yuan stood up and stared at the young man in front of him in surprise. His eyes were full of passion. If the quality of Zhuowen's dragon soul was not high, Elder Shi Yuan would not be interested in helping Zhuowen. After all, if the quality of the dragon soul was too low, it would be impossible for him to achieve much in the future. However, Zhuowen's dragon soul was so powerful that even the dragon soul detector in the Azure Dragon Branch Hall was shattered. Obviously, Zhuowen's dragon soul was very powerful, which also proved that Zhuowen's talent was extremely terrifying. Elder Shi Yuan also had some understanding of the former Ryuka. Once the dragon soul awakened in a Ryuka's body was of high quality, their future achievements would definitely be earth-shattering. Obviously, the young man in front of him should be such a talented person. Such a person could only be given enough help when he was weak. Then, when he became strong, it would definitely be of great benefit to the Arcane Guild. As for Emperor Qing's revenge, Elder Shi Yuan was not very worried because the Arcane Guild's influence in the Heavenly Armor continent was very strong and spread to every corner of the continent. Emperor Qing would not dare to touch the Arcane Guild. Therefore, when Elder Shi Yuan agreed to help Zhuowen, he was gambling on Zhuowen's talent and future achievements. After all, such a genius was hard to find in 100 years. Looking at Elder Shi Yuan who agreed so readily, Tuan was stunned. However, after thinking for a moment, he understood Elder Shi Yuan's idea and said in surprise, "Thank you for your help, Elder Shi Yuan." Next, Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan discussed some details about the rescue in the dungeon of the Imperial City. After setting the rescue time, they temporarily stayed in the Arcane Guild. 3 days later, Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan left the Arcane Guild and headed for the Imperial City. When the two entered the Imperial City, they did not act immediately. Instead, they found an inconspicuous inn and prepared to go to the dungeon of the Imperial City at night. Elder Shi Yuan was quite curious about Zhuowen's 100 transformation technique. This technique could not only change one's appearance, but also one's aura. A secret technique that could change one's cultivation was really rare. Moreover, the two's plan was not complicated. As Zhuowen had the 100 transformation technique, he could quietly change his appearance and sneak into the dungeon of the Imperial City to act according to the circumstances. After rescuing Lu Hantian, Elder Shi Yuan would come out to help. Just as Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan were discussing the rescue plan, there was some chaos in the Blue Dragon Hall. Aoki, who was sitting on the throne, had an extremely ugly look on his face. From the information gathered by the spies of the Blue Dragon Hall, the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qing Yan had brought out were actually annihilated in Muqing County. It was said that the one who caused the annihilation of the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall was Zhuowen. Zhuowen, that little bastard, is actually not dead? Moreover, his strength has soared and he has annihilated all the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qing Yan had brought. Aoki slammed the armrest of the throne. His face was pale and his heart was inexplicably shocked. Not only because Zhuowen was not dead, but also because Zhuowen's strength had soared. This time, Qing Yi, Su Lingtian and the elites of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qing Yan had brought out were not weak. However, they had all been annihilated by Zhuowen. Moreover, it was said that the masters and elites of the three big families, the Grand Family, the Chao family and the Feng family, were also annihilated in Muqing County. Zhuowen's strength was somewhat beyond Aoki's expectations. How did he manage to survive? Moreover, how did his strength soar so much in such a short period of time? Could it be related to Emperor Qing? Aoki muttered to himself. Back then, Yuan had been taken away by Emperor Qing. It was obvious that Zhuowen's appearance was related to Emperor Qing. Moreover, later on, Aoki had sent many martial artists to Muqing County to investigate. To their astonishment, they had discovered that Zhuan seemed to have evaporated from the world and there was no trace of him. In addition, the people of the Zhuo family were nowhere to be found. This made Aoki feel even worse. What is Emperor Qing doing? I respect him as an outer sect elder of the main hall, so I have always tolerated him. However, he actually released such an important person like Zhuowen and even helped him increase his cultivation. This is outrageous. I have to ask him. The more Aoki thought about it, the more upset he felt. In the end, he decided to head to the imperial city to verify with Emperor Qing. The sky gradually darkened as a green figure streaked across the sky. He passed through the sky above the imperial city and directly arrived at the throne room. The guards of the imperial city did not stop him. After all, Aoki was the hall master of the Blue Dragon Hall. They still knew him, so they would not foolishly stop Aoki. After entering the throne room, he came to a magnificent hall. He saw Emperor Qing standing quietly in the center of the hall with his hands behind his back. His eyes were slightly closed as if he was cultivating. As if he sensed someone coming in, Emperor Qing slowly opened his eyes. He stared at Aoki and said, "I wonder why Prince Aoki is here?" Aoki snorted and said, "Elder Qing Ji, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. Why did you bring Zhuowen back to the imperial city?" Emperor Qing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, "This is my private matter. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with Prince Aoki, right?" "Elder Qing Ji, don't blame me for being rude. This time, the experts sent by the Blue Dragon Hall to Muqing County have all been annihilated. This has nothing to do with you." Aoki snorted. Emperor Qing frowned slightly and said unhappily, "Prince Aoki, what does this have to do with me? Also, there are no experts in Muqing County. How could the Blue Dragon Hall be annihilated?" "Because the person who annihilated the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall was Zhuan. Back then, Zhuan was taken away by you, Elder Qing Ji. Now, not only is Zhuan not dead, but he is also alive and well. Elder Qing Ji, do you think this has anything to do with you?" At this point, Aoki's tone was slightly agitated and his voice became extremely cold. This time, the Blue Dragon Hall had suffered a great loss. Basically, the Azure Dragon Guards were all dead. Moreover, Qing Yan, who had a third-grade dragon soul, had also fallen. This was a great blow to the Blue Dragon Hall. "What? You said that Zhuan appeared in Muqing County and annihilated the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall? You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.